From birth, she was a lowly slave, never daring to imagine she could replace a noble lady and rewrite her destiny. Gu Diok and her father lived a life of servitude, catering to the whims of a spoiled, arrogant, and unreasonable young mistress. Gu Diok not only attended to the mistress's daily needs, but also performed her duties, including studying and calligraphy. Over time, Gu Diok not only mastered these tasks, but also learned to leverage her skills for extra income. Her greatest aspiration was to save enough money to escape this miserable existence with her father. They even devised a secret hand signal. If Gu Diok made this gesture, it meant they would meet at the city gates and flee together. As a lowly slave, Gu Diok knew her life expectancy was short, death a likely outcome. She'd witnessed her own mother's death from illness, powerless to help. As a child, she'd pleaded with the mistress's family for assistance, only to be met with cruel mockery. "Slaves like you are worth less than pigs," they'd sneered. "You don't deserve treatment." One day, Gu Diok overheard her fellow servants gossiping about the mistress's impending marriage. She couldn't fathom why anyone would want to marry such a woman. Someone whispered, "The young master must be crazy to agree to it." The man betrothed to the mistress was Sing Wei. Curious about his future bride, he wanted to see for himself what the woman he would spend his life with was truly like. His stepmother sang the mistress's praises, claiming that despite her commoner background, she was exceptionally talented, intelligent, and resourceful. If it weren't for So-dae, Sung Wei might have believed her. So-dae, however, painted a different picture. He told Sung Wei that the mistress was, in reality, utterly incompetent, incapable of performing even the simplest tasks. Therefore, Sung Wei became intrigued by Gu Diok. Coincidentally, while attending a performance, he encountered her disguised as a boy, selling peanuts. Recognizing Sung Wei as So-dae's cousin, Gu Diok offered him a bag, eager to make a sale. Though he didn't care for peanuts, Sung Wei was captivated by her quick wit and persuasive charm. Having missed a prime selling opportunity, Gu Diok asked So-dae to get her a kitchen job at an upcoming birthday feast for a wealthy elder, hoping to earn extra money. So-dae agreed, but warned her to be cautious of the mistress. Speaking of the devil, Gu Diok's blood ran cold as she saw the mistress approaching. She bolted, running straight into Sung Wei, dressed in nobleman's attire. She assumed he was also in disguise until he revealed he was the crazy man about to marry the mistress. Mortified, Gu Diok turned to flee again, but Sung Wei stopped her, leading her to the city wall. Watching a shadow play depicting the idyllic life of a poor family, Sung Wei scoffed, dismissing it as trivial. Gu Diok, however, disagreed. "For those of us born into lowliness," she explained, "these stories offer comfort, a brief escape from our hardships." Her words struck Sung Wei like a lightning bolt. A wave of emotion washed over him as he realized how sheltered his life had been, how oblivious he'd been to the struggles of others. He pulled a jade pendant from his robes, offering it to Gu Diok as a gift. The following day, Gu Diok arrived at the kitchen as planned. The mistress, however, recognized Gu Diok's distinctive cooking style from the mere aroma of the food. She immediately headed towards the kitchen. So-dae, seeing this, rushed to warn Gu Diok. In her panic, Gu Diok stumbled into Sung Wei's quarters, hiding behind a screen. The mistress, spotting Sung Wei, instantly forgot about Gu Diok and launched into a pretentious display of her supposed knowledge, hoping to impress him with her intellect. Sung Wei, unimpressed, bluntly called her out on her incompetence and declared his intention to break off the engagement. Gu Diok, trembling behind the screen, accidentally made a noise. The mistress, hearing it, discovered Gu Diok's hiding place. Enraged, she blamed Gu Diok for Sung Wei's rejection. Convinced she had seduced him, she ordered the guards to brutally beat Gu Diok. Even Gu Diok's father, who tried to intervene, received a merciless thrashing. Still seething, the mistress declared she would have Gu Diok bathed and presented as a gift to the elderly lord. Gu Diok realized this was her only chance to escape. She made the secret hand signal to her father. Tonight, they would run. Bathed and brought before the lord, Gu Diok pretended to undress. The lecherous old man, anticipating a willing participant, was shocked when she pulled a sickle from her clothes and swung it wildly, slashing at him. She screamed, "This is for my mother!" The lord cried out, "Someone, help!" Hearing the commotion, the mistress rushed in, raising her hand to strike Gu Diok. The mistress shrieked, "Get your filthy hands off me!" Gu Diok snarled, "Filthy? You're the filthy one. You should die. No one deserves to die," her eyes blazing. "And you are the filth." She shoved the mistress, dumping a chamber pot over her head. Gu Diok and her father met at their designated spot. With the help of sympathetic villagers, they finally escaped. Humiliated and furious, the mistress hired bounty hunters to capture them. Unbeknownst to her, Seung-wi had doubled the bounty to deter them. The father and daughter found refuge in an inn. Fearing he would only endanger her, the father slipped away while Gu Deok slept. The innkeeper, understanding Gu Deok's plight, allowed her to stay. A year passed with no news of her father. Gu Deok resolved to continue waiting. Then one day, the arrival of a noble family at the inn changed Gu Deok's fate forever. A young lady named Tae-young approached her, a friendly smile on her face. The two conversed easily, quickly becoming friends. Tae-young often bought Gu Deok jewelry and always offered assistance when she struggled. Gu Deok cherished this friendship, assuming Tae-young's kindness stemmed from pity. "It's because I have privilege," Tae-young explained, "that I feel obligated to help those who don't." Deeply touched, Gu Deok confided in her, sharing her past sufferings and her dreams of a better life with her father. Tae-young, in turn, revealed her aspiration to become a government official, providing legal aid to commoners who lacked literacy and understanding of the law. Witnessing their close bond, the innkeeper implored Tae-young and her ambassador father to take Gu Deok back to their homeland with them. Tae-young, after a moment's thought, agreed. It was her first time returning home since childhood, and she wanted her friend by her side. That night, Tae-young visited Gu Deok, placing her grandmother's jade ring on her finger. She described her grandmother's appearance and personality, as well as those of her attendants. Suddenly, a commotion erupted outside. As the door burst open, a flaming arrow flew into the room. Bandits had attacked the inn. Tae-young's father and the innkeeper were killed. Gu Deok and Tae-young barricaded themselves in a room, but the bandits set fire to the inn. The flames spread rapidly. A falling beam pinned Tae-young's leg. Seeing the fire intensifying, Gu Deok broke through a wall, intending to drag Tae-young to safety, but Tae-young pushed her out, sacrificing herself as the room was engulfed in flames. The next morning, when Gu Deok awoke, Tae-young's grandmother mistook her for her granddaughter. "You're alive!" she cried, embracing her. "Thank goodness!" Gu Deok murmured, still in shock. She had been a runaway slave. Now, through a cruel twist of fate, she was mistaken for a noble lady. She considered slipping away but couldn't bear to deceive Tae-young's grandmother. Kneeling before her, she confessed her true identity, recounting the tragic events. The grandmother, devastated by the loss of her granddaughter, was stunned. She asked, "Why are you wearing these silk clothes and my ring?" Bewildered, "Lady Tae-young gave them to me," Gu Deok explained. "She and the ambassador, moved by my story, took me as their ward. I deserve punishment for impersonating Lady Tae-young," Gu Deok pleaded. "But please, allow me to speak with the magistrate. I know who the murderers are." Gu Deok had once stumbled upon the bandits' hideout. Accompanying the grandmother, and posing as Tae-young, she recounted the events to the magistrate. She even vividly remembered the bandits' faces, requesting ink and paper to draw their portraits. Her detailed account impressed the grandmother. Looking at the wanted posters, the grandmother instructed Gu Deok to continue impersonating Tae-young until the bandits were captured. "If your true identity as a runaway slave is revealed," she warned, "it would ruin our family." In the days that followed, Gu Deok continued to surprise the grandmother with her abilities and resourcefulness. The grandmother discovered that Gu Deok wasn't just literate, but also gifted in poetry, painting, mathematics, and embroidery. More importantly, Gu Deok had silenced the gossiping noblewomen. Tae-young's father, upon returning to their homeland, was to assume a prestigious position at the academy, a fact that bred resentment among the other noble families. They'd reveled in the rumor that only the granddaughter had returned. One particularly spiteful lady sent Tae-young, actually Gu Deok, a condescending letter. Gu Deok responded with a subtly cutting poem, implying they were butchers who enjoyed the squeals of pigs. "Good heavens!" the lady exclaimed. "How dare she?" The grandmother, learning of this, was immensely pleased. Soon after, the bandits were captured. When they refused to confess, Gu Deok boldly appeared before the magistrate, identifying them. The bandits received 100 lashes, and their leader recognized Gu Deok as the servant from the inn. Undeterred, Gu Deok addressed him. "The people you killed could have helped so many others. Even in death, you will find no peace." Her vengeance was complete. Following Tae-young's earlier instructions, Gu Deok distributed gifts from the old dynasty to the servants, finally presenting one to the grandmother. "This aloe pot is from Tae-young for you," she said. "It's resilient, just like you." Tears welled up in the grandmother's eyes. That night, Gu Deok prepared to leave. Removing the jade ring, she knelt before the grandmother's door to say goodbye. To her surprise, the grandmother appeared. From now on, she declared, "You will live as Tae-young." Gu Deok was bewildered. How could she possibly replace the lady? Taking you in was Tae-young's dying wish, the grandmother explained. You will fulfill her final desire. You will become Tae-young in every way, and no one will ever know the truth. 2 years passed, and Gu Deok transformed. Even Tae-young's brother failed to recognize her. The only unchanged habit was her preference for sleeping on the floor. When the grandmother had to travel to Hanyang, Gu Deok saw her off, a wistful expression on her face. A government official noticed her pensive look and then glanced at a wanted poster before walking away. Another man appeared, staring intently at Gu Deok's wanted poster. It was Sung Wee. He snatched the poster, concealing it. He was now a renowned storyteller, adored by women, traveling the country. Wherever he went, he collected Gu Deok's wanted posters. This particular performance was in Cheonsu, where Gu Deok now resided. Her loyal handmaid rushed home, excitedly sharing the news with Gu Deok and urging her to attend. Seeing Gu Deok's unfamiliarity with Sung Wee, the handmaid launched into a gushing description. He wasn't just a talented singer, dancer, and rapper, but also a gifted novelist. Still unimpressed, Gu Deok remained indifferent, until Beaty the handmaid recounted the plot of his novel. The main character is a nobleman, she explained, who falls in love with a peanut-selling girl. He gives her one of the precious pearls from his hat as a token of his affection. Gu Deok froze. The story sounded eerily familiar. Upon further reflection, she was certain it was about her and Sung Wee. The nobleman in the story, after all, traveled extensively along the coastal regions. She asked, intrigued. Gu Deok, her curiosity piqued, accompanied Beaty to the performance. The venue was packed, buzzing with the excited screams of female fans. When Sung Wee removed his veil, Gu Deok was stunned to see the man she knew. Sung Wee, lost in his performance, recounted the tale of his and Gu Deok's fleeting encounter. What ignites the fire in your heart? He asked dramatically. What are your dreams? My dream, he declared, is the ocean. Then, he saw her. Their eyes met. He whispered, Gu Deok. She quickly turned and fled. Even after leaving, Gu Deok remained shaken. Noticing her unusual demeanor, Beaty was convinced she knew Sung Wee. Suspecting a romantic connection, she took it upon herself to confront him. Tell me, she demanded, did you give her a pearl from your hat? He had his servant lure Gu Deok out for a meeting. When she arrived, Sung Wee poured out his longing, explaining that he only toured coastal regions because of her stated dream of the ocean. He believed they were destined to meet again. This, however, was purely Sung Wee's wishful thinking. Gu Deok was both bewildered and angry. She couldn't understand his intense feelings, based on 2 brief encounters. She was furious that he, knowing she was a fugitive, had written about her, exposing her story to the public. Then why do you still wear that pearl? He challenged. You've never taken it off. Gu Deok retorted. It's the only valuable thing I had as a slave. Her attachment to the pearl didn't signify longing for him. I was happy to see you again, she admitted, her voice cold. But I hope we never meet again. Sung Wee was devastated by her rejection. To add insult to injury, Gu Deok seemed far happier to see So Dae, his servant. So Dae pleaded with Gu Deok to forgive Sung Wee, revealing he had given all the money from the lord to the bounty hunters. Gu Deok, touched by this unexpected act of kindness, softened slightly. Sung Wee, witnessing their friendly exchange, burned with jealousy. Gu Deok didn't blame Beaty for her well-intentioned meddling. Beaty cared deeply for Gu Deok. Seeing her loneliness and isolation, confined to the house with no other friends, Gu Deok, however, was content. I don't dare ask for more. At least she had Beaty. Sung Wee, unwilling to give up, postponed his departure and sought out Gu Deok, inviting her on a research trip for his writing. Gu Deok reluctantly agreed. He took her to a secluded beach, where a small house stood, mirroring a scene Gu Deok had once imagined. Sung Wee shared his experiences of the past 3 years. He'd initially used storytelling as entertainment, but discovering his talent for captivating audiences, he'd honed his singing, dancing, and rapping skills, driven by a desire to improve and gain recognition. Hoping Gu Deok might find him, he explained that he wore a veil because his story had disgraced his family, but he had no regrets. He felt truly free, living authentically. He then turned the question back to Gu Deok. Why are you living like this, trapped in someone else's identity? Just like I used to be? Even if I left, Gu Deok replied, I would still be a runaway slave. Come with me, Sung Wee urged. We can travel throughout the country, searching for your father. I want you to live as you, not hidden behind a mask. Gu Deok felt her resolve wavering. Then, the unthinkable happened. Upon returning home, she received devastating news. Beaty was dead. The authorities claimed suicide, but no one believed it. The wound on the back of Baek Yi's neck clearly indicated murder. Du Qi, another servant, spoke a name. Du Guang. He insisted Du Guang was the killer. He'd been lurking around the OK household and had tried to persuade Baek Yi to go to Hanyang with him. Du Qi and others knew about this, but as mere servants, they felt powerless. Gu Diok refused to let Baek Yi's death be ruled a suicide. She wanted to go to the magistrate and demand justice. The other servants urged her to give up, reminding her that injustice was their lot in life. "We're treated worse than dogs and pigs," they lamented, and that's the truth. Their words triggered painful memories for Gu Diok. "Baek Yi wasn't a dog or a pig," she declared fiercely. "She was my only true friend." Seeing Gu Diok's determination, Maxim stopped her, pushing the other servants out of the room. She couldn't let her risk exposure. "Run away with that man," she urged. "It's what Baek Yi would have wanted. She only wanted your happiness." Gu Diok, tears streaming down her face, felt utterly helpless. Then she remembered Taeyong's words, "Don't do anything for me. From now on, whatever you do it for yourself." Gu Diok made her decision. She sought out Sung Wai, returning the pearl and asking him to forget her. Gu Diok, and her dreams, she stated firmly, died in that fire 2 years ago. I am living Taeyong's life. Her dreams are now mine to fulfill. Sung Wai took the pearl, his expression pained but resigned. "Now," he said softly, "you truly are yourself." At that moment, Maxim stormed into the Baek household, demanding to see Du Guang. "Your son keeps pestering my daughter," she raged. "Do you know how many times he's begged her to run away to Hanyang with him?" Lady Baek, humiliated in front of the other noblewomen, flew into a rage, striking Maxim with her cane. Hearing her still shouting for Du Guang, she felt further insulted and ordered her servants to prepare for a beating. Just then, Gu Diok arrived. "Stop," she commanded. "Why are you beating her?" Though they'd never met, everyone recognized her as the OK family's daughter. Lady Baek, sneering, was about to order Gu Diok's punishment as well, when the newly appointed magistrate arrived with his officers. Gu Diok seized the opportunity. She accused the Baek family of murdering Baek Yi and staging it as a suicide. A doctor from a neighboring village corroborated her claim, confirming the autopsy report was falsified. The righteous magistrate demanded Lady Baek's cooperation, threatening to arrest the entire household. Gu Diok thanked him for reopening the case. The magistrate replied, "It's my duty then." Intrigued, inquired about her name. Gu Diok was done. Done with slavery, done with being silenced, done with injustice. She had a burning desire in her heart, a dream bigger than herself, to become Roshian's first female lawyer. A dream she now carried in honor of a deceased young lady who had shared the same ambition. And her first case, it was a powder keg. A servant girl named Baek I had been found dead. The official story? Suicide. But Gu Diok knew better. She boldly accused the young master, Du Guang, of murder, taking her case directly to the district magistrate. Her accusation was explosive. Baek I had rejected Du Guang's advances, and in a fit of rage, he had murdered her. To cover up his crime, he'd bribed not one, not two, but a dozen coroners to falsify the death as a suicide. Gu Diok, with a fire in her belly, demanded justice. She demanded that the magistrate bring down the full weight of the law on the powerful Baek family. The Baek family, arrogant and influential, scoffed at the accusations. Lady Baek, Du Guang's mother, dismissed Gu Diok as a troublemaking slave and countered with a lawsuit of their own, accusing Gu Diok and her fellow servant, Maxim, of slander. Du Guang, cool and collected, denied any involvement with Baek I, claiming he barely knew her. Lady Baek, dripping with disdain, ordered the magistrate to release them immediately. "How dare you detain us?" she seethed. Slandering nobility is a serious crime, but the magistrate, to everyone's surprise, was unmoved by their noble status. He declared that no one, noble or not, would leave Zhangxian district until the truth was uncovered. He ordered them all confined. That night, under the cover of darkness, Lady Baek, ruthless and determined to protect her son, bribed assassins to silence the coroners who had been forced to confess. One by one, they were eliminated, removing the only witnesses to the truth. Gu Diok's case was crumbling. To further punish Gu Diok for her audacity, the Baek family hired a powerful lawyer and pressed their slander charges against Maxim. She was arrested. The law in Roshian was brutally clear. If a servant accused their master of a crime and couldn't prove it, the servant faced execution. Desperate to save her friend, Gu Diok confronted Lady Baek in her opulent home. "Why?" Gu Diok demanded, her voice trembling with anger. "Why eliminate the witnesses, destroy the evidence, and frame Maxim?" Lady Bake didn't even bother to feign remorse. "Consider it the price of falsely accusing your betters," she said coldly, "and a warning to anyone else who dares to suggest a noble could be responsible for Bakai's death." She then turned her icy gaze on Gu Deok. "As for you," she hissed, "your defiance will only lead to more deaths." Gu Deok was stunned into silence. This was her first real encounter with the raw, unchecked power of the aristocracy. And it was terrifying. But fear wouldn't save Maxim. She had to find a way. Gu Deok raced to the magistrate's office, hoping for help, but was blocked by guards. Desperate, she used her impressive martial arts skills, scaling walls and leaping across rooftops to gain entry. But as she slipped through a window, she came face to face with someone she never expected to see. "Young master?" she blurted out. "I thought you had left." She distinctly remembered Xing Hui, the charismatic storyteller, leaving town days ago. Why was he here, in the magistrate's office, dressed in martial arts attire and carrying a sword? The man looked at her with genuine confusion. "Miss," he said politely, "I'm not the person that you want." Her mind raced. "Your acting skills are truly remarkable," she exclaimed, convinced he was still in character. "You truly are a gifted storyteller." "Storyteller?" The man paused, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. He remembered the storyteller Gu Deok was talking about, a man who, he had to admit, bore a striking resemblance to himself. Gu Deok clearly mistook him for this other person. "But, I am not who you think I am." Just then, voices approached. One asked, "Is everything prepared?" Gu Deok's blood ran cold. She realized her mistake. Mortified, she wanted the earth to swallow her whole. She'd just made a complete fool of herself in front of a stranger, pouring out her heart about, well, everything. The magistrate, having overheard the commotion, intervened. He advised Gu Deok to find a lawyer to represent her against the Bake family's lawsuit. Gu Deok searched high and low, but no lawyer would dare take her case against such powerful opponents. Later, as Gu Deok frantically paced the streets, the martial artist she'd encountered earlier approached her. "Represent yourself," he suggested. "Become Bake First's a lawyer. No one understands her injustice better than you." Gu Deok protested, "But I know nothing of the law." "You don't need to know everything," he countered, "just enough to save Maxim." He then offered her something incredible. "I have the key to the magistrate's library. I can take you there to study." Gu Deok was suspicious. "Why would a martial artist like you have the key to the magistrate's library?" The man smiled. "My name is Yun Jum," he revealed. "I am the magistrate's eldest son." Gu Deok was taken aback. With the key in hand, Gu Deok began spending every waking hour in the library, poring over law books. Yun Jum, initially worried about her literacy, was surprised to find she was not only literate, but also a quick study. He was impressed by her unwavering dedication to saving her friend. He also found himself increasingly curious about her relationship with this mysterious storyteller. Gu Deok, seeing no reason to hide it, confessed, "Xing Hui, he was my first love." Though Yun Jiom and Xing Hui were practically identical, Gu Deok was confident she wouldn't mistake them again. Xing Hui possessed neither the martial arts prowess nor the wall-scaling abilities she'd witnessed from Yun Jiom. Grateful for his help, Gu Deok promised to repay Yun Jiom's kindness in the future. After days of intense study, Gu Deok felt prepared to defend Maxim. She had absorbed a surprising amount of legal knowledge. But the day before the trial, Lady Bake made a shocking offer, a settlement. "We are willing to drop the slander charges against Maxim," she announced, her voice laced with false magnanimity. "On one condition. Gu Deok must kneel before us and apologize publicly." Gu Deok refused. "I will not apologize," she declared. "I will fight for justice for Beaty Maxim." That night, sleep evaded Gu Deok. She tossed and turned, plagued by worry. She still lacked the concrete evidence she needed to prove the Bake family's guilt. Just when hope seemed lost, a servant from the Bake household secretly sought her out. He confessed that he had been ordered by Lord and Lady Bake to kill Bake First too. Lady Bake, unable to accept her son's love for a servant, had commanded the servant to eliminate Bake, hoping to sever their relationship. During a struggle, Bake had fallen down the stairs, mortally wounded. Du Guang, the young master, had been devastated, witnessing his parents' cruelty and the death of the woman he loved. The servant further revealed that the Bakes had then bribed the coroners to cover up the true cause of death. The servant also shared a heartbreaking detail. Before she died, Bake had confessed her love for Du Guang. Tears welled in Gu Deok's eyes. She understood now why Bake had always rebuffed the young master's affections. She had been protecting him by keeping their relationship secret, due to the vast difference in their social standing. Armed with this devastating new information, Gu Diok sought out Du Guang, sharing Beik's final confession. She pleaded with him to come forward, to testify, to finally seek justice for the woman they both loved. Torn between his grief and his fear, Du Guang hesitated. He couldn't bring himself to betray his parents. The next day in court, lacking sufficient evidence, Gu Diok struggled to make her case. Sim was sentenced to a brutal flogging. In a desperate attempt to save her friend, Gu Diok stepped forward and offered to take the punishment in Sim's place. Her selfless act stunned everyone present, including the servants who had gathered to witness the trial. Lady Baik, seizing the opportunity to finally silence Gu Diok, urged the magistrate to carry out the sentence. As Gu Diok was being led to the platform to receive her punishment, Du Guang finally broke. Overcome with guilt and remorse, he publicly confessed, detailing his family's involvement in Baik's first death. The Baik family was arrested. Baik finally had justice. In the aftermath of the trial, the magistrate issued a decree forbidding nobles from mistreating their servants, promising harsh penalties for any violations. He'd seen firsthand the devastating consequences of unchecked power. Yoon Jium, deeply impressed by Gu Diok's courage, intelligence, and unwavering commitment to justice, suggested to his father that she be appointed as a legal advocate, specifically to help commoners navigate the complexities of the law. Gu Diok accepted. The Baik family's downfall sent shockwaves through the noble families of Zhongxian district. Their power had been significantly weakened. In a desperate attempt to regain their footing and curry favor with the magistrate, they proposed a marriage alliance. However, the magistrate refused, unwilling to be associated with such a corrupt family. Besides, he already had the perfect daughter-in-law in mind. Not long after, Gu Diok's grandmother received a marriage proposal from the magistrate himself. She was overjoyed, seeing this as a blessing and a chance for Gu Diok to have a secure future. Gu Diok, however, was consumed with anxiety. This marriage would inevitably reveal her true identity as a servant. If discovered, the consequences could be dire, not only for her but also for her grandmother. Don't worry, her grandmother reassured her, everything will be fine. But Gu Diok remained uneasy. Seeking answers, she confronted Yoon Jium. Why me? She asked. You know I have feelings for someone else. Yoon Jium's response was both honest and disarming. Of all the women I know, he confessed, I admire you the most. Your ideals align with mine. Your opinions matter to me. If you marry someone else, I'll lose the chance to speak with you, to learn from you. I couldn't bear that, he asked gently. Does that answer your question? His sincerity disarmed Gu Diok. She could no longer keep her secret hidden. There's something you need to know about me, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. A secret I haven't told anyone. If no one knows, perhaps it doesn't matter, but I can't. Tell me, Yoon Jium urged, his gaze steady and reassuring. I will protect you. I'm not, she stammered, struggling to find the words. I am. Just as she was about to reveal her true identity, disaster struck. Her arrogant former mistress appeared seemingly out of nowhere, accompanied by a group of her servants. Luckily, Gu Diok was dressed as a noblewoman and went unrecognized. Relieved but shaken, Gu Diok pulled Yoon Jium aside and confessed everything. She told him about her life as a servant and about her dreams of becoming a lawyer. She didn't dare hope that he would still marry her, only that he would keep her secret safe. To her astonishment, Yoon Jium was unfazed. He not only accepted her secret, but revealed one of his own to reassure her. The truth is, he admitted quietly, I cannot be intimate with women. Gu Diok was taken aback. What? If my secret were discovered, he continued, I could be executed. He looked at her earnestly. You once promised to repay me, marrying me, becoming the magistrate's daughter-in-law. That would be the greatest repayment of all. He trusted her to understand, and in return, he offered her his unwavering support. This marriage, unconventional as it may be, offered both of them a lifeline, a chance for survival and mutual protection. Touched by his honesty and vulnerability, Gu Diok agreed. They were married soon after. Unbeknownst to them, Sung Hui, the storyteller, secretly attended the wedding. His heart ached as he watched the woman he loved marry another. But when he saw the groom, a man who looked exactly like him, he was bewildered. Why would she marry someone who looks just like me? He wondered. Is it so she won't forget me? The marriage between Gu Diok and Yoon Jium infuriated the noble families of Roshian. A righteous magistrate, with an intelligent and capable wife, meant their days of corruption and bribery were numbered. Li Chung II, a particularly corrupt noble, vowed to find a way to bring the magistrate down. His opportunity arrived sooner than expected. A royal emissary from Hanyang, brought Chung Il shocking news. Gold had been discovered in the mountains of Jiangxian district. The emissary suggested that Chung Il secretly mine the gold and offer it as a tribute to the Minister of the Interior. This would not only solidify Chung Il's position within the aristocracy, but also earn him a substantial share of the profits. Blinded by greed and ambition, Chung Il agreed to the risky venture. He rallied the other nobles of Roshian, promising them a share of the wealth. Together, they began secretly excavating the mountain, their illicit mine a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. Because the tunnels were narrow and dangerous, only children could be used to mine the gold. To acquire more children, Chung Il and the head of a traveling merchant troupe conspired to create fraudulent contracts. They tricked illiterate villagers into signing these documents, effectively selling their children to the merchant troupe. When some parents discovered their children were missing, they desperately pleaded for their return, only to be met with brutal violence. Gu Diok, happening upon this scene, intervened, rescuing the villagers and uncovering the fraudulent contracts. Determined to investigate and rescue the missing children, Gu Diok and her servant disguised themselves and infiltrated the merchant troupe. There, she discovered a heavily guarded room and overheard the merchant leader discussing a transaction with a nobleman. She suspected the missing children were being held captive inside. Gu Diok immediately set out to inform the magistrate. However, on her way home, she spotted Yun Jiam entering a brothel. He clearly has no interest in women, she thought, perplexed. What is he doing there? A nagging suspicion began to grow in her mind that Yun Jiam was hiding something. Upon returning home, Gu Diok reported her findings to the magistrate. He listened gravely, revealing that he, too, had received an anonymous letter detailing the merchant troupe's child trafficking operation. The letter also warned him that the troupe was monitoring his movements, planning to transport the children whenever he was absent from Jiangxian. While the magistrate was unsure of the anonymous informant's identity, Gu Diok's discovery confirmed the disturbing truth of the letter's claims. He devised a plan. He would leak false information about his departure from Jiangxian, and then secretly investigate the merchant troupe. The plan worked. That night, the merchant troupe, believing the magistrate was gone, prepared to move the children. The magistrate and Gu Diok lay in wait, ambushing the caravan. The magistrate demanded, "Where are you taking these children?" One of the merchants, his face pale with fear, replied, "If I tell you, I'll be killed." Suddenly they attacked. Chaos erupted. While the magistrate fought off the merchants, Gu Diok frantically worked to free the children. A thug lunged towards her, but at the last moment, a masked figure intervened, deflecting the blow. Gu Diok, skilled in combat, joined the fray, wielding a small knife. During the struggle, the masked figure's mask was knocked off, revealing Yun Jiam. Before Gu Diok could react, Yun Jiam scooped up a child and fled. Outmatched, the remaining merchants grabbed a few children as hostages and escaped. Returning to the scene, the magistrate asked Gu Diok if she had seen the masked figure's face. He suspected this person was the anonymous informant. Gu Diok lied, saying she hadn't. She knew Yun Jiam was hiding something, and she was determined to uncover the truth. Her search led her to the brothel. Yun Jiam, anticipating her arrival, had arranged for someone to guide her through a secret passage, leading her to a hidden underground base. There, Gu Diok discovered a dozen young boys engaged in rigorous martial arts training. Yun Jiam rushed to her side, his voice filled with concern. "What are you doing here? This is dangerous. Are you hurt?" Gu Diok, overwhelmed and confused, demanded answers. "What is going on here? Why are you training these boys in secret? Are you planning a rebellion?" In Roshian, any gathering of more than 5 people for military training was considered treasonous and punishable by death. "We are not rebels," Yun Jiam explained earnestly. "We are a volunteer corps. I am their leader." He then revealed a shocking truth. "These boys, like me, we are all different. We are, how do you say, men who love men. If discovered, we would be ridiculed, tortured, even killed. The purpose of this secret corps," he explained, "was to protect these boys, to give them the skills they needed to defend themselves in a hostile world." He had sent the anonymous letter to his father to prompt the investigation into the merchant troupe, because he had previously rescued a young boy, also different from him, who had been kidnapped by them. He was determined to create a more tolerant world, a world where people like him could live without fear. He believed that Gu Diok, a champion of equality, would understand. While Gu Diok understood his motives, she couldn't shake the feeling that what he was doing was incredibly dangerous. That evening, as Gu Diok prepared to leave the hidden base, chaos erupted in the brothel above. A nobleman's son, having taken a liking to one of the musicians, propositioned them, only to discover the musician was male. Outraged, the nobleman's son declared that this perverse creature not only insulted him, but also defiled the moral fabric of Zhongxian. He insisted on taking the musician to Roshan to be executed. Gu Diok intervened immediately, berating the nobleman's son. "Criminals are brought to the magistrate," she declared, "not Roshan. If you dare take this young man to Roshan, I will personally go to the magistrate and accuse Roshan of unlawful imprisonment." Silenced by her forceful intervention, the nobleman's son reluctantly agreed to take the musician to the magistrate. Yoon Jeom, learning of the incident, prepared to rescue the musician, knowing that regardless of where he was taken, his fate was likely sealed. Gu Diok stopped him, promising to use the law to save the young musician. Reassured by her confidence, Yoon Jeom reluctantly agreed to stand down. The next day in court, Chung Il and the other nobles of Roshan, eager to uphold what they considered the moral standards of Zhongxian, unanimously called for the musician's execution. The magistrate, pressured by their influence, reluctantly sentenced the young man to death. Just then, Gu Diok stepped forward, holding a scroll. She announced her intention to defend the musician. The magistrate scoffed. "There's no need," he said dismissively. "There are no laws protecting those kinds of people. They are not covered by the law." Which means, Gu Diok countered, there are also no laws that allow you to execute them. "Impudent woman," Kung Yu roared. "How dare you challenge the moral order of Zhongxian?" Gu Diok replied calmly. "I am merely trying to prevent a senseless murder." "Murder?" Chung Il exclaimed. "How much longer must I listen to this nonsense? Are you suggesting we simply let this abomination go free?" Gu Diok explained that while there was no specific law, there was precedent for how to handle such cases. She presented the scroll to the magistrate. It detailed a historical case where a king had addressed a similar situation. The king, instead of ordering an execution, had simply banished the individuals to a remote location to live in seclusion. Even the king did not presume to take a life given by the heavens, Gu Diok argued. How can you justify executing someone simply for being different, based on a law that doesn't even exist? The nobles were speechless. The magistrate, swayed by her argument and the historical precedent, agreed to postpone the execution. He would send a report to the royal court and await their decision. The musician was released and returned to the brothel, grateful for Gu Diok's intervention. Yoon Jeom, too, was deeply grateful. But Gu Diok remained troubled. She had noticed a small branded mark on Yoon Jeom's shoulder. Roshan law strictly forbade such markings. They were associated with rebel groups. Anyone bearing such a mark could be deemed a traitor. Yoon Jeom, sensing her concern, understood her fear. He told her that if she asked him to disband his volunteer corps, hide his mark and his true nature, and simply be an obedient husband and son, he would do it. Later, Gu Diok and the magistrate resumed their search for the remaining children kidnapped by the merchant troupe. One of the rescued children provided Gu Diok with a crucial clue. "When I was held captive," the child whispered, "I overheard the merchant leader say they were going to the mountains." Gu Diok rushed home to inform the magistrate of the child's clue, suggesting the missing children might be hidden in the mountains. The magistrate immediately ordered a search of the mountains to commence the following day. News of the impending search reached Chung Il and the merchant leader. If the gold mine were discovered, they would be ruined. They had to find a way to stop the search. Just then, one of the children who had worked in the mine mentioned a masked man who had visited them while they were held captive by the merchants. The man had promised to rescue them and take them to a brothel to learn martial arts. The words martial arts sparked an idea in Chung Il's mind. If he could find these men, he could accuse them of being rebels. This would distract the magistrate, forcing him to focus on capturing the supposed rebels and abandon the search of the mountains. Acting quickly, Chung Il reported to the royal inspector that rebels were hiding in the brothel. The royal inspector ordered the magistrate to halt the mountain search and prioritize capturing the rebels. Chung Il led a group of men to the brothel. He discovered the secret passage and stormed into the volunteer corps' hidden base. The musician, seeing Chung Il, urged Yoon Jeom to escape. Chung Il attacked, killing the musician, and then presented the body to the royal inspector as proof of a rebellion. "This man is a rebel," he declared. "They all bear the rebel mark, a heart-shaped brand." The magistrate, bound by the royal inspector's orders, had no choice but to call off the mountain search and redirect his forces to hunt down the supposed rebels, anyone bearing the heart-shaped mark. Hearing the news, Gu Diok frantically packed Yoon Jeom's belongings, urging him to flee. Before they could leave, the magistrate insisted on inspecting Yoon Jeom to ensure his innocence. Gu Diok, thinking quickly, assured her father-in-law that she had already examined him, easing his concerns. Just as they were about to depart, Yoon Jeom dramatically revealed the truth. He tore open his shirt revealing the heart-shaped brand, and declared himself the leader of the volunteer corps. The magistrate, furious and heartbroken, demanded an explanation. Yoon-jam replied, "Because I am like them, father. We are those who are not accepted by society." Gu Deok stepped forward, confirming she knew of Yoon-jam's activities, and pleading with the magistrate for understanding. From now on, the magistrate declared, his voice heavy with disappointment, "You will live only as my son and her husband, and even if it means cutting flesh and bone, you will remove that mark." "I cannot do that, father," Yoon-jam replied resolutely. "Before I am your son, or a husband, I am the leader of this corps." Knowing he couldn't sway his son, the magistrate drew his sword, disowning him. He ordered Yoon-jam to leave Jongseon and never return, threatening to execute him for treason if he ever saw him again. Tearfully, Yoon-jam bid farewell to his father. As he and Gu Deok attempted to escape, they were spotted by guards. They fled, taking refuge in a nearby house. Gu Deok pushed Yoon-jam into a room, bravely facing the guards alone. But they dragged Yoon-jam out, demanding he remove his shirt for inspection. Gu Deok's heart pounded in her chest. To her surprise, the guards found nothing and left. At that moment, the real Yoon-jam emerged from a different room. He had hidden in Seunghui's room. Seunghui, realizing Yoon-jam bore the forbidden mark and understanding the desperate situation, selflessly switched places with him, taking Yoon-jam's place. With the guards gone, Seunghui and Gu Deok escaped Jongseon. Yoon-jam promised Gu Deok he would return, heartbroken and facing certain reprimand for his son's actions. The magistrate ordered Gu Deok to divorce Yoon-jam immediately and leave the Sung household. "The matter of the rebels is not over," he said grimly. "I will surely be held accountable. I will not have you dragged down with me." Gu Deok believed the magistrate would be safe, as there was no evidence linking him to the supposed rebels. But her hopes were shattered when the royal inspector arrived with a royal decree. The decree declared the magistrate guilty by association for failing to capture the rebels. He was stripped of his position, his property confiscated, and awarded to Chung-il, who was falsely lauded for capturing the rebels. This meant that Gu Deok, as part of the magistrate's household, now belonged to Chung-il. To compound her grief, the former magistrate, unable to bear the shame and shock of his dismissal, died suddenly. In a single night, Gu Deok had lost everything: her position, her home, her family, and her father-in-law. Everything she held dear was now in the hands of her enemy. Chung-il, now occupying the Sung family's confiscated estate, held lavish parties, flaunting his newfound wealth and power. The other noblewoman sneered at Gu Deok, whispering that she was a harbinger of bad luck. Even Gu Deok began to question her fortune. Seunghui, hearing of Gu Deok's misfortune, rushed to her side, offering comfort and encouragement. He urged her not to give up. "You must expose the truth," he insisted. "Clear the magistrate's name and Yoon-jam's." Bolstered by his support, Gu Deok resolved to fight back. But just then, Chung-il's wife decided to sell Maxim, Gu Deok's closest confidant and servant. To Gu Deok, Maxim was more than a servant. She was like a second mother, the keeper of her secrets. Gu Deok couldn't bear to lose her. Disregarding her precarious position, she went to Chung-il's house and knelt before them, begging for Maxim's return. Chung-il, filled with contempt for Gu Deok, refused. He would rather sell Maxim cheaply than return her. Undeterred, Gu Deok remained kneeling throughout the night. The following morning, Chung-il's wife was moved by Gu Deok's unwavering plea. A noblewoman kneeling for a servant? Such genuine loyalty and affection touched her heart. She relented, returning Maxim to Gu Deok. Overjoyed, Gu Deok and Maxim profusely thanked Chung-il's wife, promising to repay her kindness in the future. However, as soon as Maxim was returned, Chung-il's mother mocked her daughter-in-law for her act of charity. "Returning a mere servant girl means nothing," she sneered. "After all, you've taken so much from her already." Chung-il's wife, stung by the remark, questioned her mother-in-law. "The king awarded us the magistrate's estate as a reward for capturing the rebels." Her mother-in-law revealed the shocking truth: there were no rebels. Chung-il had orchestrated the entire scheme to frame the Sung family, eliminating the magistrate, who stood in the way of his illegal gold mining operation. Horrified, Chung-il's wife confronted her husband. She searched his study, finding his meticulously kept records detailing the illegal gold mine in the mountains. Framing someone and illegal mining were both crimes punishable by death. Chung-il, smug and arrogant, reminded her that he had silenced the musician, the only witness who could prove the Sung family's innocence. He boasted, "No one will ever know the truth." Infuriated, Chung-il's wife considered exposing him, but her mother-in-law urged her to remain silent. "We are in this together now," she warned. If you expose him, your son will suffer the consequences as well. Torn, Chung Il's wife reluctantly agreed, but she penned a letter detailing everything before leaving the house, unable to bear the weight of her husband's crimes. Meanwhile, Gu Deok began her investigation. Determined to clear her husband's and father-in-law's names, she went to the magistrate's office, now under new leadership, demanding they reopen the investigation into the child trafficking and the false accusations against the Sung family. The royal inspector insisted that Gu Deok needed concrete evidence and witnesses to reopen the case. Gu Deok requested a face-to-face confrontation with Chung Il, the man she believed had accused the Sung family. The royal inspector informed her that it wasn't Chung Il who had formally lodged the accusation, but rather Jun Ki, the provincial governor, a high-ranking official sent directly by the royal court. A commoner like Gu Deok had no chance of securing a meeting with someone of Jun Ki's stature. Her investigation hit a dead end. Back at her now confiscated home, Gu Deok's brother-in-law shared a piece of gossip he'd overheard from a classmate. His friend had overheard Chung Il boasting that there were no rebels and that the whole thing was a fabrication to cover up something happening in the mountains. He had framed the Sung family to divert attention. Then, a servant who had accompanied the magistrate during the supposed rebel hunt informed Gu Deok that the musician had supposedly killed was, in fact, still alive. He had merely been severely injured and had fallen unconscious. The magistrate had secretly taken him to a temple at the foot of the mountains. These two pieces of information led Gu Deok to a startling conclusion. There was more to the story than just child trafficking. Chung Il was hiding something significant in the mountains. Determined to uncover the truth, Gu Deok decided to investigate the mountains herself. Learning of Gu Deok's plan, Sung Hui insisted on accompanying her. Gu Deok worried for his safety, as he had no combat skills, but Sung Hui was adamant. He wanted to help her, regardless of the danger. Unable to dissuade him, Gu Deok reluctantly agreed. The following day, disguised as men, they set out on their journey. At the temple at the foot of the mountains, they confirmed the musician was still alive, though unconscious. After thanking the monks, they continued their arduous trek. That evening, they reached the mountainside, finding shelter in an abandoned house. As they shared a simple meal of rice balls under the dim light, memories of their past together surfaced. Sung Hui finally voiced the question that had been haunting him. Why did you marry Yoon Jum, a man who looks exactly like me? Gu Deok insisted it was a coincidence. Sung Hui pressed further, asking about the relationship between Yoon Jum and the musician. Why did they have the same scar? Gu Deok reluctantly revealed Yoon Jum's secret. She explained that he was different and that they had confided in each other before their marriage. Sung Hui was overwhelmed by a mix of jealousy and heartache. He had always wanted Gu Deok to be happy, but now her family was shattered, her husband on the run. After a long silence, he asked, "When all of this is over, will you leave Jiangxian with me?" He painted a picture of a peaceful life together, far away from the turmoil. Gu Deok listened quietly, drawn to the promise of such a simple, happy life. But in the end, she declined his offer. They resumed their journey. Their supplies dwindled as the mountain path grew steeper and more treacherous. The threat of encountering patrolling soldiers loomed large. Despite the hardships, Sung Hui never complained, always looking out for Gu Deok. As they neared the summit, Gu Deok noticed an increasing abundance of four-leaf clover, a plant known to accumulate gold, and often used as an indicator of gold deposits. She then recalled the royal inspector's words. The accusation against the Sung family had come from provincial governor Jun Ki. She asked Sung Hui, "What exactly does a provincial governor do?" He replied, "They are officials primarily responsible for investigating local specialties and gold mines." The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Suddenly it clicked. The mountains held a gold mine. The kidnapped children were being used as forced labor. The illegal mining operation was the secret Chung Il was desperately trying to protect. Gu Deok and Sung Hui continued their ascent. At the same time, the provincial governor unexpectedly summoned Chung Il, questioning him about the rebels and making veiled references to the mountains. Though Chung Il managed to deflect the questions, he grew wary and immediately reported the conversation to Jun Ki. As a precaution, Jun Ki ordered the miners to abandon the mountain and halt operations. Before leaving, the miners locked the children in a makeshift prison, leaving them to their fate. Shortly after, the fleeing miners encountered Gu Deok and Sung Hwi. Recognizing them, the miners gave chase, determined to silence them. Gu Deok and Sung Hui were cornered at the edge of a cliff. To protect Gu Deok, Sung Hui embraced her and jumped. Miraculously, they landed in a pool of water below, surviving the fall. While they had escaped immediate capture, Gu Dayak developed a high fever, exacerbated by the plummeting nighttime temperatures. Weakened and shivering, she knew their pursuers would soon find them. Urging Sunghui to save himself, she whispered, "Go, don't worry about me. Don't blame yourself. Thank you for saving me so many times." With that, she closed her eyes and lost consciousness. Just as their pursuers closed in, Sunghui drew his sword, prepared to fight to the death to buy Gu Diak time. When Gu Diak awoke, she found herself face to face with Dol Siak, the man her family had once hired to kill the servant girl from the OK household, the very man she had later set free. Dol Siak explained that after she'd spared his life, he had joined a community of refugees living in the mountains. A few days ago, he said, "We saw armed men in the mountains. We formed patrols to protect ourselves. Last night, we found Sunghui performing his last dance." With Dol Siak's help, Gu Diak located the entrance to the gold mine, but it appeared the miners, warned of their approach, had already fled. The mine was deserted. Just then, they heard cries for help. Following the sound of a nearby wooden shed, they realized the kidnapped children were imprisoned inside. As they prepared to free them, the merchant leader's men appeared, surrounding them. They shouted, "No one leaves here alive." A fierce fight ensued, but Dol Siak's small band of refugees was no match for the trained thugs. They were quickly overpowered. Just as Gu Daok's life hung in the balance, the royal inspector's soldiers arrived, turning the tide of the battle. The thugs were arrested. News of the arrests quickly reached the merchant leader and the Bake family. The merchant's eldest son urged his father to seek help from the former magistrate, the one who had initially collaborated with them. That night, the merchant leader and his son visited the former magistrate. But when they mentioned the arrests, the former magistrate feigned ignorance, effectively washing his hands of the affair. He then issued a thinly veiled threat. "If something were to happen to me," he warned, "none of you will be safe." The merchant leader understood the implication, collapsing in despair. The following morning, resigned to his fate, the merchant leader prepared to confess to the authorities. But as he stepped out of his house, Gu Diak was waiting for him. Gu Diak asked, "Are you going to confess?" Her voice laced with a mixture of anticipation and disdain. "Are you going to sue me?" The merchant leader's eldest son retorted, his voice tinged with nervousness. "We will return all the gold we mined and fully compensate the children." Gu Diak cut him off before he could finish. The merchant leader, standing beside his son, erupted in anger. He roared, "Haven't we done enough? No matter how clever you are, you'll never find the truth, because I have no intention of confessing." "Is that so?" Gu Diak's voice dripped with ice. "Then hold on to that arrogance. Never bow your head and admit your guilt, because if you do, I might actually feel a flicker of remorse when I see your blood spill and your body torn apart." As Gu Diak turned to leave, the merchant leader's wife, who had remained silent until now, stopped her. Without a word, she knelt before Gu Diak, her head bowed low. Gu Diak didn't even acknowledge her. The day of the trial arrived. Du Jiam, Gu Diak's brother-in-law, petitioned the court to restore his father's honor, demanding the return of their confiscated property and household members. He announced he had a witness who could prove their innocence. When the merchant leader saw the witness, he nearly collapsed. It was the musician, the man he thought he had killed. The musician testified that although he was male, he had the heart of a woman. "We are not rebels," he declared. "We are a sanctuary for those of us who are different." The royal inspector questioned why the musician hadn't come forward sooner. "Someone wanted me dead, framed as a rebel," the musician explained. "I was stabbed and left for dead, only recently regaining consciousness." It was clear he was implicating Chung Il. However, when pressed to name the person responsible for the attack, the musician claimed he couldn't remember. Everyone was stunned. Only Gu Diak remained calm, as if she had anticipated this. The royal inspector then asked how they could verify the musician's claims. "I await the king's judgment," the musician replied, "whether it be exile or execution. After I woke up, I could have run. I didn't have to risk my life, but I could not betray those who accepted me for who I am. I refuse to live with a false label of herbal for the rest of my life. That is why I am here today." The royal inspector, convinced by the musician's sincerity, agreed to send a report to the king, requesting a retrial. He declared, "I believe the truth will soon be revealed." The next case was Chung Il's confession to illegal gold mining. He readily admitted his guilt, pleading for leniency. However, the royal inspector was baffled. Chung Il had defied a royal decree, established an illegal mine, forged documents, trafficked children, and subjected them to forced labor. Why was he so eager to confess? He suspected a larger conspiracy. But with Chung Il taking full responsibility, there was little he could do. "The sentence will be carried out immediately," after the appropriate punishment has been determined. Just then, Gu Deok stepped forward, formally requesting to defend Chung Il. Everyone was taken aback. Even the royal inspector was confused. He asked incredulously, "You wish to defend the man who framed your father-in-law and caused his death?" "Yes." The royal inspector, seeing her resolve, reluctantly agreed. Gu Deok addressed the court, pointing out that Chung Il had knowingly defied a royal decree by mining gold, an act tantamount to embezzling royal funds. According to precedent, she argued, he should be branded and publicly executed in the marketplace as a warning to others. She then detailed his other crimes, forging documents, kidnapping, and exploiting children, citing Article 298 of the Great Ming Code, which prescribed severe punishment, including immediate flogging. Chung Il was dumbfounded. Was this a defense? It sounded more like a death sentence. But then, Gu Deok's tone shifted. According to Article 25 of the Great Ming Code, she explained, if two offenses are charged simultaneously, only one can be prosecuted. Furthermore, Article 24 clearly states that those who confess are exempt from punishment. The royal inspector, perplexed, asked, "Why are you so well versed in the law, and why are you defending this villain?" Gu Deok explained that illegal gold mining was rampant throughout the country. Despite repeated royal decrees, it was difficult to control. If we severely punish Chung Il now, she argued, others will be afraid to confess their crimes. She further pointed out that Chung Il had returned all the mined gold and offered double compensation to the children. Therefore, she concluded, "I implore you to make an exception and spare Chung Il's life. I believe this act of mercy will ultimately benefit the country and its people." Swayed by her eloquent argument, the royal inspector commuted Chung Il's sentence. However, that night, a furious Chung Il stormed into the OK household, not to thank Gu Deok, but to berate her. "Who do you think you are?" he raged. "How dare you humiliate me with your pity?" Gu Deok calmly replied, "I have not forgiven you. I defended you for two reasons. First, to repay your wife's kindness in returning Maxim to me. And second, because my father-in-law gave me some final advice before he passed." She then revealed the magistrate's last words, "Before the law, all are equal. Even your enemies deserve a fair defense. Only then can you become a true advocate for justice." The former magistrate, it seemed, had anticipated Chung Il's betrayal and prepared Gu Deok for this very moment. Overcome with remorse, Chung Il promised to return the Sung family's confiscated property and servants. The former magistrate's name was finally cleared. Du Jium, his younger son, tearfully carried his father's memorial tablet back to their ancestral home. With everything resolved, Sung Wai prepared to leave Zhongxian. Before departing, he retrieved the button he had given Gu Deok, a memento of their shared past. Though she wouldn't go with him, Gu Deok finally confessed her feelings. She admitted, "You were my first love," her voice barely a whisper. She explained that initially, the difference in their social standing had held her back. Later, it was her commitment to her work, to seeking justice. She confessed, "But I have always cherished the memories we shared." Though Sung Wei didn't turn back, tears streamed down his face. Two lovers parted ways. A bittersweet ache settling in Gu Deok's heart. 7 years passed. Gu Deok established the largest legal aid organization in the city. Throughout the years, Du Jium had become more than a brother-in-law. He was her friend, her confidant, almost like a son. Their close bond often raised eyebrows. During those 7 years, whenever Gu Deok faced hardship or felt lost, she wrote letters to her absent husband, pouring out her thoughts and feelings. She didn't know where to send them, or if he would ever receive them, but the act of writing brought her solace. Now, Du Jium was of marrying age, and Gu Deok found herself unsure how to navigate this new challenge. One day, while strolling through the market, Du Jium bumped into a young woman. She apologized politely and turned to leave. He noticed she had dropped a piece of jewelry, and as he called out to her, she turned, warning him not to approach her. Intrigued, he persisted, returning her jewelry. She admonished him, telling him it was inappropriate to speak to her in such a manner. She recited, according to Article 355 of the Great Ming Code, with a playful smirk on her face, "Threatening and coercing others is punishable by 80 lashes." The young woman exclaimed, "Stop following me." Flustered. Later, the young woman sought help at Gu Deok's legal aid office. She introduced herself as Mi Ryong, from a neighboring district. She explained that a neighbor suffering from a skin ailment had been unfairly dismissed from their job without pay. Gu Deok was impressed by Mi Ryong's articulate and compassionate manner. To verify Mi Ryong's claims, Gu Deok and Maxim traveled to the neighboring district. They discovered that the skin ailment was not contagious, and that Mi Ryong had thoughtfully gathered those affected into a separate area. providing them with care and support. The next day, Mai Ryong visited Gu Deok to express her gratitude, coincidentally encountering Du Jium, who was preparing to leave for an arranged marriage meeting. Through conversation, Mai Ryong realized she had misjudged Du Jium earlier. Gu Deok and Maxim, seasoned observers of human interaction, recognized the spark of mutual attraction between the two young people. That evening, Gu Deok encouraged Du Jium to take some high-quality aloe vera to Mai Ryong as a friendly gesture. However, before they reached her house, they saw her hurrying off somewhere. Uncommon for a noblewoman to be out alone at night, they followed her. Curious, they discovered Mai Ryong regularly brought food to a woman who was being abused by her husband, timing her visits when the husband was away. Gu Deok and Du Jium were deeply touched by this act of kindness, their admiration for Mai Ryong growing. Inspired by Gu Deok's work, Mai Ryong expressed her desire to help others and joined the legal aid office. Unbeknownst to them, the entire scenario, including the sick villagers and the abused wife, was an elaborate ruse orchestrated by Mai Ryong's father. He had hired actors to deceive Gu Deok as part of a complex revenge plot. 2 days later, So Dae, a former acquaintance, sought Gu Deok's help. Sung Hui had attacked someone in a theater with a sickle. He faced a possible life sentence. Gu Deok immediately informed Du Jium, requesting permission to travel to defend an old acquaintance. Du Jium, recognizing the urgency in Gu Deok's voice, and understanding that this old acquaintance was likely the man who looked exactly like her brother, didn't object. He said, "Just come back soon," with a hint of sadness in his voice. On the day of her departure, as Gu Deok boarded the boat, she caught sight of her long-lost husband, Yoon Jium. Throwing all decorum aside, she cried out his name. But though he heard and saw her, he showed no recognition. Turning his back and boarding a different ship, Gu Deok felt a piece of her heart break. She stood on the dock, watching as the ship carrying Yoon Jium sailed away, the words she longed to speak catching in her throat. She couldn't understand his cruel indifference. 7 years of waiting. For what? The ship disappeared into the distance. Led by the servant, Gu Deok finally reached the prison, where Seung Hui was held. Sung Hui could hardly believe his eyes when he saw the woman he longed for standing before him. He gripped the bars, his voice thick with emotion. "How have you been?" Gu Deok, trying to maintain her composure, urged him to explain what had happened so she could help him. She was eager to get him released and back to his family. Sung Hui looked at her, bewildered. "Family? I've never been married. I don't have a wife or children." The servant, realizing his deception had been uncovered, confessed. He had feared Gu Deok wouldn't come if she knew Seung Hui was alone, so he'd invented the story about a family. He then explained the injustice Seung Hui had suffered. Sung Hui had taken on a disciple, pouring his heart and soul into teaching him his craft. However, the disciple had betrayed him, stealing Seung Hui's manuscript. The book, titled The Inspector and the Maiden, was based on Seung Hui and Gu Deok's story. Seung Hui had written it as a tribute to their shared past, a private testament to their love. The disciple had stolen the manuscript and rewritten it, twisting their innocent love story into something vulgar and obscene, completely distorting Seung Hui's original work. Enraged, Seung Hui had confronted him, leading to his arrest. He hadn't wanted the book published. It was meant to be a private keepsake, a collection of memories only for himself. Armed with this knowledge, Gu Deok met with the magistrate. Identifying herself as a member of the legal aid organization, she subtly revealed Seung Hui's true identity, the eldest son of the esteemed former magistrate Song. She implied that if Magistrate Song were to discover his son was imprisoned, there would be serious consequences for the current magistrate. Initially, the magistrate had dismissed Seung Hui as a mere storyteller. However, upon learning of his true lineage, he grew concerned and agreed to Gu Deok's request for a public trial. At the trial, Gu Deok presented 2 versions of the book, one the original, and the other the plagiarized copy. Under pressure, the disciple slipped up, admitting he had burned the original manuscript. Gu Deok, seizing the opportunity, demanded both Seung Hui and the disciple rewrite the story on the spot. Seung Hui wrote quickly and fluidly, while the disciple struggled, unable to produce anything coherent, finally overturning the table in frustration. It was clear who the true author was. The magistrate declared Seung Hui innocent, sentencing the disciple to 30 lashes. With the matter resolved, Gu Deok prepared to return home. Seung Hui, reluctant to see her go, urged his servant to find a way to delay her departure. The loyal servant fabricated a story about a damaged boat, advising Gu Deok to stay a few more days. Gu Deok, having no reason to suspect otherwise, agreed. Unbeknownst to her, Seung Hui's release had also been facilitated by his father, the former magistrate Song. who Gu Deok had contacted. Before leaving for Seung-Wee's trial, Gu Deok had written a letter to the former Magistrate Song. Unexpectedly, Magistrate Song arrived in person, urging Seung-Wee to reconcile with him. The servant added that since his wife's passing, Magistrate Song's health had deteriorated, further emphasizing the need for reconciliation. Still resentful over being banished, Seung-Wee stubbornly refused. Staying with Seung-Wee's troupe, Gu Deok found herself captivated by his rehearsals, her gaze lingering on him. When he approached, she quickly composed herself, asking the servant to accompany her to buy gifts for her family. Seung-Wee volunteered to go instead, being more familiar with the area. As they shopped for face veils, Seung-Wee gently placed one on Gu Deok, asking if it suited her. Gu Deok, wanting to recapture the easy familiarity of their past, asked him to drop the formalities. She suggested, "Let's pretend these 2 days are a chance to relive our past." Seung-Wee agreed. "Let's pretend it's all a brief, beautiful dream." Strolling through the marketplace, Seung-Wee revealed he had given Gu Deok a private nickname. Long ago, meaning flying bird. He hoped she would always be free, soaring like a bird, unburdened by constraints. Gu Deok, touched by his sentiment, asked why he had remained single for the past 7 years. "For me," Seung-Wee confessed, his gaze locking with hers. "Only Gu Deok is enough. No other woman matters." Gu Deok's heart fluttered. Bound by her marriage, all she could offer him were these 2 days. A temporary escape from their realities. They cast aside their worries, enjoying each other's company as they selected gifts. Seung-Wee's eyes never left her, wanting to memorize every detail, every expression. On their way back, Gu Deok asked Seung-Wee to go ahead, saying she had something to do. She sought out Magistrate Song, persuading him to attend Seung-Wee's performance that evening, hoping to mend their fractured relationship. That night, Seung-Wee poured his heart and soul into his performance. Gu Deok watched from the crowd, her heart swelling with pride. From his private box, Magistrate Song recognized his son's passion, finally accepting his chosen path. After the performance, the troupe manager announced exciting news. They had been invited to perform in the Great Qing Dynasty as cultural ambassadors. The troupe erupted in cheers, Gu Deok among the most enthusiastic. As they celebrated, Seung-Wee, who didn't drink alcohol, smiled as he watched Gu Deok and the servant engage in a friendly drinking contest. The servant, emboldened by the alcohol, urged Gu Deok to stay. After all, he slurred, "Your husband hasn't shown up in 7 years. Seung-Wee, about to question this, was interrupted by the servant, who quickly covered up his slip, claiming he was just speculating, as Gu Deok had forbidden him from mentioning her husband to Seung-Wee. Magistrate Song approached Seung-Wee, revealing that Gu Deok had invited him to the performance. He expressed his newfound acceptance of his son's life, asking him to come home. Overjoyed by his father's validation, Seung-Wee agreed, and their long-standing conflict finally resolved. Seung-Wee thanked Gu Deok for everything she had done. She replied sincerely, "I just want to see you happy." Seung-Wee sighed wistfully. "I wish your husband would never return," echoing the servant's drunken words. "Then I could keep you here with me." He was willing to abandon everything to be with her. But Gu Deok, ever practical, insisted she would continue living as she was, and encouraged him to pursue his dream of becoming a renowned storyteller. Seung-Wee rested his head on her lap, taking her hand. "Let me stay like this, just for a little while," he pleaded. "This is our last chance to be close. When I wake up, the dream will be over." When Seung-Wee awoke, Gu Deok was gone. For him, it was a dream he knew he would never experience again. He awoke to loneliness, clutching the memory of their time together, vowing to cherish it for the rest of his life. Gu Deok returned home, embracing her waiting grandmother, fighting back tears, and forcing herself back to reality. During her absence, Mai Rong's true identity had been revealed. She was the daughter of Lady Park, a vengeful noblewoman who blamed Gu Deok for her family's downfall. Lady Park had arranged Mai Ryong's marriage to Gu Deok's brother-in-law as part of her revenge plot. Mai Ryong was to act as a spy, reporting back on the happenings within the Sung household. To win Du Jium's affections, Mai Ryong had orchestrated 2 elaborate schemes. First, resolving a neighborly dispute to showcase her compassion, mirroring Gu Deok's kindness. And second, dramatically pushing Du Jium out of the way of an oncoming cart, injuring herself in the process to appear heroic and selfless. Du Jium, completely taken in by her performance, fell deeply in love. Upon her return, Gu Deok, hearing of their blossoming romance, arranged their wedding. On their wedding day, she gifted Mai Ryong a bracelet, assuring her of her support. After the wedding, Du Jium asked Gu Deok about his brother's disappearance. Gu Diok tried to deflect the question, wanting to protect Yoon Jeom's secret, but Do Jeom had already guessed the truth. He expressed his anger and frustration at his brother's absence. Unbeknownst to them, Mai Rong eavesdropped on their conversation, Maxim noticing a shadowy figure lurking by the door. Elsewhere, the noblewomen gathered for a social gathering. The new magistrate's wife recounted the story of a virtuous widow in a neighboring district who had received a chastity commendation. The magistrate's wife, envious and eager to gain prestige for her district, longed for a similar virtuous widow in her jurisdiction. That evening, Lady Park approached the magistrate's wife, revealing that both her husband and son were deceased. She offered to help the magistrate's wife secure a chastity commendation in exchange for assistance in her revenge plot against Gu Diok. The next day, news arrived that Yoon Jeom was dead. Gu Diok, reeling from the sudden news, trembled as she lifted the cloth covering the body. The corpse was badly decomposed. She had it turned over, examining the back. There was no heart-shaped tattoo. She declared, "This is not Yoon Jeom." She informed the magistrate that Yoon Jeom had a distinctive scar on his back that couldn't be easily removed. Do Jeom, too, noticed discrepancies between the body and his brother's appearance. Gu Diok refused to believe Yoon Jeom was truly dead. Returning home after examining the body, Maxim shared some disturbing rumors. Following Lady Park's instructions, Mi Ryong had planted a cursed effigy in her bridal chamber. The magistrate's wife was now spreading rumors that Gu Diok was responsible for the cursed doll. Gu Diok wondered who was spreading the rumors. Maxim mentioned seeing a shadowy figure outside their office the previous day. Mai Ryong, fearing exposure, quickly interjected that many people had been coming and going during the wedding preparations. At a social gathering, the new magistrate's wife criticized Do Jeom, saying Gu Diok's behavior was damaging the district's reputation. Do Jeom defended Gu Diok, arguing she wasn't a widow, and the body wasn't his brother's. The other women dismissed his concerns, claiming that Yoon Jeom's 7-year absence was as good as death. Gu Diok presented the cursed effigy to the former magistrate's wife, who recognized the seriousness of the situation. She confided in Gu Diok, suggesting that Lady Park, fueled by vengeance, was likely behind the recent events. Determined to resolve the situation, Do Jeom decided to search for his brother. Gu Diok finally revealed her encounter with Yoon Jeom at the docks, explaining how he had seen her but deliberately turned away. It was clear he was intentionally avoiding her. Searching seemed futile. Do Jeom, however, refused to give up hope. The next day, the family bid farewell to Do Jeom as he embarked on his search. The new magistrate's wife, ever the informant, immediately reported this to Lady Park, who continued to spread rumors, tightening the noose around Gu Diok. Do Jeom, carrying a portrait of his brother, searched tirelessly, but days turned into weeks with no results. Discouraged, he was about to give up when his servant suddenly rushed towards a man, excitedly calling him young master. The man, mistaken for Yoon Jeom, was Sung Wee. From Sung Wee's reaction, Do Jeom knew this wasn't his brother. Having met Sung Wee once in his childhood, he approached, explaining the situation. Through the servant's lament, Sung Wee learned of Yoon Jeom's 7-year absence and Gu Diok's plight. Falsely labeled a widow and living in misery, Sung Wee's servant informed Do Jeom that he had seen Yoon Jeom boarding a ship bound for the Great Qing dynasty. After Do Jeom left, Sung Wee pressed his servant, sensing he was hiding something. The servant recounted the dock incident, revealing how Yoon Jeom had deliberately ignored Gu Diok. Sung Wei was furious on Gu Diok's behalf. She shouldn't waste her tears on such a heartless man. The servant, however, understood Gu Diok's loyalty. She had saved Yoon Jeom's family, raised his brother, and endured the stigma of widowhood, all while remaining devoted to him. Learning of Gu Diok's unwavering loyalty and the hardships she had endured, Sung Wee's heart ached. He wanted to rush to her side immediately, but his servant stopped him. "You are now the head of the Song family," he reminded him. "Interfering in Gu Diok's affairs will only complicate things for her." Sung Wee, though reluctant, knew he was right. Meanwhile, Gu Diok was reviewing old case files, casually showing one to Mi Ryong. To Mai Ryong's horror, it was the case involving her own family. The details vastly different from her mother's version of events. Hiding her shock, she asked about Beaky's death. Maxim recounted the tragic story, revealing that Beaky's parents had been responsible, and their son had been banished. Gu Diok expressed her regret over the outcome. Armed with this new information, Mai Ryong confronted her mother. Even now, Lady Park refused to acknowledge her son's feelings for Beaky, insisting Beaky had seduced him, and blamed Gu Diok for everything. For the first time, Mi Ryong saw the depth of her mother's consuming hatred. She wanted no part in it, but her mother threatened her. reminding her of all the things she had done for her. Her past orchestrated by Lady Park. Seeing Mai Ryong's fear, Lady Park reveals her next plan: to kidnap Gu Deok, strip her naked, and leave her in the streets. With Gu Deok gone, everything would belong to Mai Ryong. That night, Lady Park eagerly awaited Gu Deok's arrival, but it was an unharmed Gu Deok who walked through the door. Mai Ryong, unable to bear the weight of her deception, had confessed everything to Gu Deok, revealing her mother's plot. To Mai Ryong's surprise, Gu Deok calmly revealed she already knew her true identity. Having investigated Lady Park's background, after the former magistrate's wife mentioned seeing her at the wedding, Gu Deok offered Mai Ryong a chance to redeem herself. When Mai Ryong led her accomplices to capture Gu Deok, soldiers, pre-alerted by Mai Ryong, were waiting to arrest them. Gu Deok confronted Lady Park, reminding her that after all these years, she still refused to accept the truth, that she was responsible for her son's demise. Gu Deok gave her a final warning, promising severe consequences if she continued her vendetta. Returning home, Gu Deok found Mai Ryong packing her belongings, preparing to leave. Mai Ryong, consumed by guilt, confessed her story. She had lived a life of privilege, until suddenly being sent to live with poor relatives. Her mother had filled her head with stories of Gu Deok's supposed wrongdoing, fueling her desire for revenge. But during her time with the Sung family, she experienced genuine kindness and acceptance, realizing she had been misled. Gu Deok, seeing her remorse, took Mai Ryong's hand, urging her to stay. From now on, she promised, "I will care for you as my daughter. This will always be your home." With the domestic issues resolved, Gu Deok's attention turned to her brother-in-law's search. After being robbed, beaten, and wandering for weeks, Du Jiam finally found a lead on his brother's whereabouts. He found Yoon Jiam, but his brother showed no sign of joy at their reunion. Meanwhile, the thugs involved in the gold mining scheme had contacted the royal emissary. Seeking revenge on Gu Deok, the emissary pressured the new magistrate to act against her. The magistrate raided Gu Deok's legal aid office, destroying her files and arresting her, declaring she was confined to her home until the identity of the body could be confirmed. Gu Deok watched in anguish as years of work went up in flames. Imprisoned, Gu Deok was ordered to observe a 3-year mourning period and maintain strict seclusion, or the magistrate would fabricate a story of her dying from grief. Gu Deok knew the magistrate was colluding with Lady Park. She refused to compromise, vowing to die with her honor intact. Mai Ryong, recalling seeing her mother at the scene of Gu Deok's arrest, confronted Lady Park. Lady Park, no longer hiding her true intentions, revealed her desire not only to destroy Gu Deok, but also to seize the Sung family home. Make Sim overheard their conversation and berated Lady Park. Lady Park slapped her, and Mai Ryong, rushing to intervene, suddenly collapsed, clutching her stomach. While Mai Ryong was unconscious, Lady Park seized control of the household, mistreating the servants, and even gifting the magistrate's wife the ring Gu Deok had given her. Make Sim cared for Mai Ryong, who, upon waking, experienced nausea. Realizing she was pregnant, she swore Maxim to secrecy. Meanwhile, Gu Deok endured torture in prison. Near death, she remembered Tae Young, the man who had saved her life, and urged her to live well. She forced herself to sit up, noticing a note from Maxim revealing Lady Park's takeover. To survive, she feigned weakness. The magistrate, satisfied, released her, ordering her to collect the body and prepare for the funeral. Gu Deok complied, placing the body in the coffin. As she knelt to perform the final ritual bows, she hesitated. One more bow, and she would be branded a widow, her freedom and future forever constrained. She refused. The magistrate, annoyed, ordered her to be forced down. Just then, a voice rang out. Yoon Jiam appeared, shattering the rumors of his death. The crowd erupted in gasps and whispers. Lady Park fled in terror. Gu Deok stared at the man before her, tears streaming down her face. Du Jiam led Yoon Jiam home to pay respects to their father. Yoon Jiam explained his absence, claiming he had suffered a head injury during a shipwreck, resulting in amnesia. He had washed ashore in the Great Qing dynasty, with no identification or memory of who he was. To earn passage home, he had worked odd jobs, slowly saving money. Gu Deok was skeptical of his story. She sought out Lady Park, who was still residing in their home. Not wanting to upset Du Jiam with the truth about his mother-in-law's schemes, Gu Deok decided to host a farewell party for Lady Park, asking her to leave afterward. Mai Ryong, racked with guilt, wanted to confess her deception to Du Jiam. Just as she was about to reveal the truth, Gu Deok interrupted, announcing Mai Ryong's pregnancy. Du Jiam was overjoyed, oblivious to Mai Ryong's hesitation. To test Yoon Jiam's identity, Gu Deok invited him for drinks. He He declined, claiming he wanted to rest before the party the next day. Gu Diok didn't press the issue. The following day, Gu Diok hosted a lavish party, inviting all the noblewomen and the magistrate. She noticed her ring on the magistrate's wife's finger, but chose to ignore it. During the party, Lady Park and the magistrate slipped away to speak privately. Gu Diok followed, this being her true motive for hosting the party. She overheard their conversation. The magistrate questioned Yoon Jum's survival, while Lady Park blamed him for not killing Gu Diok in prison. They argued, the magistrate revealing he had bribed officials to secure the chastity commendation, and would suffer a significant loss if it wasn't approved. After their heated exchange, they returned to the party, feigning normalcy. Gu Diok, too, pretended she hadn't witnessed their clandestine meeting. The magistrate's wife asked Yoon Jum to make a toast. He declared he wouldn't forgive anyone who had harmed Gu Diok. Sensing the tension, he quickly added that they should let go of past grievances. Maxim, observing him, remarked that his public speaking skills had improved significantly during his absence. As the party ended, Gu Diok instructed Maxim to prepare the bedroom, knowing she and Yoon Jum would finally share a bed. Maxim, delighted, bustled off to make arrangements. Later that night, Gu Diok and Yoon Jum shared drinks. He remained remarkably sober, despite consuming several cups. Determined to uncover the truth, she pulled him onto the bed, tearing open his shirt to examine his shoulder. To her astonishment, he bore the identical heart-shaped tattoo. This time, it was Yoon Jum who was shocked. He had no idea how the mark had gotten there. Gu Diok, her suspicions confirmed, simply said, "This man with no memory is not my husband." Furthermore, Gu Diok had been having the magistrate follow, uncovering his connection to the one-eyed thug involved in the gold mine incident. She reported her findings to the royal inspector, who encouraged her to seek justice. Gu Diok, however, chose to bide her time, wanting to avoid alerting her enemies, trusting that justice would eventually prevail. Yoon Jum and Du Jum worked together to repair the damaged legal aid office. Gu Diok urged Du Jum to return home to his pregnant wife. As they spoke, Mi Ryong noticed a strange smell. Du Jum produced a bottle of wine, explaining it contained medicine given to him by his mother-in-law. Suspicious, Mi Ryong instructed him to leave the wine with her. She would arrange a small gathering for the two brothers. After Du Jum left, Mi Ryong tested the wine, dipping a silver spoon into it. The spoon turned black. Realizing her mother's sinister intentions, she trembled with fear. Meanwhile, Gu Diok overheard Yoon Jum humming a familiar tune and heard the servant remark that Yoon Jum seemed taller, his old clothes no longer fitting properly. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Gu Diok summoned Yoon Jum to the pavilion, where she had parted ways with Sung Wai years ago. "I said goodbye to someone I loved here," she began, her voice laced with emotion. "That man. He sneezes uncontrollably when exposed to pollen." She then blew a handful of pollen into the air. Yoon Jum clamped a hand over his nose, desperately stifling a sneeze. He asked, "When did you realize?" His voice muffled. "Your eyes," Gu Diok replied. "They looked at me the same way." "Ah," Yoon Jum chuckled. "I suppose love and sneezes are impossible to hide." Gu Diok playfully swatted him. He then confessed everything. He had even convinced Du Jum with his elaborate charade, getting the tattoo and taking medicine to suppress his alcohol tolerance. He'd spent years honing his martial arts skills, never expecting Gu Diok to see through his disguise. Back at the house, Sung Wee's servant arrived with news. For Gu Diok's sake, Sung Wee had declared himself dead, supposedly lost at sea on the voyage to the Great Qing dynasty. He was willing to sacrifice everything for her. Gu Diok pieced together the events, realizing the lengths Sung Wee had gone to protect her, hoping she would accept him as her true husband. She recalled every moment since they had met, how he had always been there for her, risking his life time and again. Now, he had even given up his dreams, his very identity, for her. Overwhelmed, she called everyone together, demanding the full story. Du Jum explained that he had traveled to the Great Qing dynasty in search of his brother, and had finally found him. He had told Yoon Jum about their father's death, and Gu Diok's struggles. To his dismay, Yoon Jum had shown no concern, telling him not to bother him, and that if he were discovered, everything he had been working for would be ruined. Du Jum had pressed him, asking what he was planning, but Yoon Jum had refused to elaborate, simply telling him to consider him dead. Dejected, Du Jum had been preparing to return home when he encountered Sung Wai. Sung Wee, worried about Gu Diok, knew he couldn't abandon his troop. Their performance in the Great Qing dynasty, a royal command. After careful consideration, he had concocted the story of his death at sea. His body never recovered. He would disappear completely, allowing Yoonjam to take his place. Knowing about the tattoo, and to avoid being exposed, he had endured the painful process of getting it himself. He had hoped, with Doojiam's help, to fool everyone, never expecting Gu Deok to see through his charade. Gu Deok, deeply moved by Seung-Wee's sacrifice, thanked him, but she knew impersonating Yoonjam wasn't a sustainable solution. She proposed that they leave Jongseon together once everything was resolved. "But your father," she began, her voice laced with concern. "He will be devastated if he believes you are dead." Seung-Wee urged her not to worry about others for once. He was willing to protect everything she held dear, willing to sacrifice everything to be with her. Before they could resolve their discussion, chaos erupted. Doojiam frantically announced that Mi Ryong was missing. As they searched, the servant delivered shocking news. Mi Ryong had killed her mother and been arrested. Everyone was stunned. The truth about Mi Ryong's and Lady Park's relationship could no longer be hidden. Gu Deok explained Lady Park's vendetta against her family, and how she had manipulated Mi Ryong into seeking revenge, only for Mi Ryong to later regret her actions. She reassured Doojiam, promising to go to the magistrate in the morning to understand the situation. Doojiam was devastated. He couldn't comprehend that Mi Ryong had deliberately deceived him, that perhaps she had never truly loved him. Early the next morning, Gu Deok visited Mi Ryong in jail, urging her to tell her everything. Mi Ryong confessed that her mother had given her 3 pills, instructing her to slip them into Doojiam's wine so he would share it with his brother. Upon discovering the pills were poison, Mi Ryong confronted her mother, demanding an explanation for her cruelty. Lady Park, consumed by jealousy, had admitted her motive. Doojiam's success as a state exam scholar, and his subsequent marriage and impending fatherhood bring Gu Deok great pride and joy. Lady Park, bitter and resentful, had lamented that if her son were still alive, she too would be the mother of a scholar. Basking in the reflected glory and witnessing her son's happiness, she blamed Gu Deok for her son's death, for robbing her of these joys. Consumed by vengeance, she wanted to destroy Doojiam, the person Gu Deok cherished most, condemning her to a lifetime of misery. Mi Ryong, in tears, had urged her mother to confess. Lady Park had asked for a glass of water. When Mi Ryong returned, her mother was dead. Mi Ryong revealed to Gu Deok that her mother's plans had extended beyond harming Doojiam and Yoonjam, to create the illusion of Yoonjam's death and solidify Gu Deok's widowhood. Lady Park and the magistrate sought out the former Park family servant, Dol Seok, who was hiding in a cave. They had not only murdered everyone in the cave, but also disfigured Dol Seok's face, placing Yoonjam's handkerchief on the body to create a false identity. Knowing the extent of her mother's crimes, Mi Ryong, seeking to atone, accepted responsibility for her mother's death, wanting to die rather than live with the guilt. Gu Deok comforted her, assuring her that the past was not her burden, and promising to find the true culprit and clear her name. The magistrate, arrested for murder, begged Gu Deok to defend him, to save his life. Gu Deok, however, recounted his crimes, holding him accountable for the innocent lives he had taken. He was sentenced to death. Later, Gu Deok and Seung-Wee visited the former magistrate's wife's home to retrieve a missing item. Outside the house, Seung-Wee found a ring, the very ring the former magistrate's wife had stolen from Gu Deok and gifted to the new magistrate's wife. Gu Deok immediately confronted the magistrate's wife with the stolen ring. Meanwhile, Seung-Wee, like an older brother, counseled Doojiam, reminding him that if Mi Ryong hadn't truly loved him, Gu Deok would never have consented to their marriage. He urged Doojiam not to let anger cloud his judgment, and to recognize Mi Ryong's genuine affection. Doojiam, looking at the baby clothes Mi Ryong had sewn, his heart softened. The next day, at Mi Ryong's trial, Gu Deok defended her. Mi Ryong confessed to poisoning her mother, but revealed that the actual cause of death was strangulation. She also testified about Lady Park and the magistrate's plot against Dol Seok and the others. The magistrate, summoned to the court, denied the accusations. Gu Deok recounted the conversation she had overheard between him and Lady Park at her party, demanding to know for whom he had written the letter of guarantee. The magistrate, realizing he had been caught, confessed, pleading for mercy. Someone had promised him the chastity commendation in exchange for his cooperation. He had been a pawn in a larger game. Gu Deok announced, "I have captured the true murderer of Lady Park," requesting the suspect be brought forward for confrontation with the magistrate. The one-eyed thug was brought in, but he denied any involvement with the magistrate or Lady Park's murder. Gu Deok then called upon the magistrate's wife to testify. The magistrate's wife recounted how she had gone to Lady Park's house to return the ring. As she arrived, she saw Mi Ryong leaving to fetch water. At that moment, The one-eyed thug had stormed in, strangling Lady Park. He had then attempted to attack Mi Ryong upon her return, but the soldiers, alerted by the commotion, had arrived just in time. With his crime exposed, the thug tried to shift the blame to the magistrate, claiming he had been acting on his orders. Witnessing their conflicting accounts, the royal inspector ordered both men arrested. Mi Ryong was cleared of all charges and released. Du Jiam arrived to escort Gu Deok home. Their misunderstandings were resolved, and they returned with a renewed sense of familial bond. In prison, the one-eyed thug threatened the magistrate, warning him that if he revealed who was behind the plot, his family would suffer dire consequences. Undeterred, the royal inspector reported the case, including the manipulation of the chastity commendation system, to the king. New, stricter regulations were implemented to prevent similar tragedies. Gu Deok, suspecting a larger conspiracy, requested the one-eyed thug's release. She planned to have him followed, hoping to uncover the true mastermind. As she spoke, a guard arrived with the news. The magistrate had died in prison. Following the plan, the royal inspector released the one-eyed thug. He attempted to intimidate Gu Deok, but was quickly subdued by Sung Wei. Gu Deok had brought justice to those who had been wronged. The magistrate announced that the royal court would commend Gu Deok for her service, erecting a monument in her honor, and awarding each household in the district a bolt of cotton. The people cheered, thanking Gu Deok for bringing honor to their community. Sung Wei accompanied Gu Deok to the marketplace, where she was greeted with respect and gratitude. The people thanked her for her tireless advocacy and for using her position within the legal aid office to improve their lives. Gu Deok was deeply moved. Her efforts had made a difference. She decided to follow her heart. Turning to Sung Wei, she said, "Be my true husband. Let's stay here, together, and do the work I was meant to do." Sung Wei's voice choked with emotion. Gu Deok had built a remarkable life for herself. He, standing by her side, felt no regret for abandoning his dreams. He had stepped onto the greatest stage of his life. Having Gu Deok as his wife was a dream come true. "One day, you will understand that death is inevitable," he said softly. "But even if I only have one day as your husband, I will have no regrets." Sung Wei and Gu Deok agreed to keep their charade a secret. However, unbeknownst to them, danger still lurked. The one-eyed thug, upon his release, reported back to the royal emissary, boasting that he hadn't betrayed him. The next day, he was silenced permanently, murdered by the emissary's men to ensure his silence. The royal emissary was entertaining a guest. Unexpectedly, the guest was none other than Lady Su He, the very woman Gu Deok had served years ago. Meanwhile, Gu Deok and Sung Wei, their hearts finally at peace, decided to remain in Gyeongseon. On their way home, a comfortable silence settled between them. Being with Gu Deok as her husband was a dream come true for Sung Wei. They decided to share the news with their families. Everyone was overjoyed, except for Du Jiam, who noticed a lingering sadness in Gu Deok's eyes. He suspected she was worried about Sung Wei's true identity being discovered and the potential repercussions for their family. He reassured her, reminding her that he had brought Sung Wei back so she could be with the man she loved. "Live for yourself now," he urged. "Don't worry so much." Later, as Gu Deok was undressing in her room, she heard a rustling sound. Turning, she saw Sung Wei's head pop out from under the covers. She quickly clutched her clothes, demanding to know what he was doing in her room. Sung Wei, with a mischievous grin, declared that since they had decided to live as husband and wife, they should share a bed, like a real married couple. Gu Deok, flustered, reminded him that they hadn't officially married and were only pretending. Sharing a bed was inappropriate. Sung Wei, however, was persistent. "It's all part of the act," he insisted. "If we sleep separately, it will arouse suspicion." Gu Deok, unconvinced, pushed him out of the room. The next day, Gu Deok resumed her work at the legal aid office. Make Sim brought her breakfast, explaining that Sung Wei had instructed her to prepare it according to Gu Deok's preferences. Touched by his thoughtfulness, Gu Deok considered reassigning the household chores before leaving for work. But Maxim assured her that Sung Wei had already gathered the servants and delegated tasks, ensuring Gu Deok could focus on her work without worry. As she was leaving, Sung Wei stopped her, sensing her anxiety about returning to work after a long absence. He took her hand, teaching her a little self-encouragement ritual. Their intimate gesture made the observing servants blush and quickly avert their gazes. Make Sim and the other servants were delighted by the couple's affectionate interactions, agreeing that a child would complete their happiness. But for a child, they needed consummation. With this in mind, they secretly drilled a peephole in the ceiling above Sung Wei's room. Oblivious to their scheme, Sung Wei met Gu Deok after work. They strolled under the starlit sky, their conversation easy and comfortable. Gu Deok shared the day's events, her worries melting away in his presence. As they returned home, Mak Sim and the others sprang their trap, announcing that Sung Wee's room had collapsed and was uninhabitable. Gu Deok, falling for their ruse, offered to share Mai Ryong's room for the night, giving Sung Wei her room. Mak Sim quickly intervened, reminding Gu Deok that Du Jium and Mi Ryong always shared a room, making it inappropriate for her to impose. Sung Wei, seizing the opportunity, ushered Gu Deok into his room before she could protest. Lying stiffly in bed, they recalled their last time sharing a room, in the mountains 7 years ago. Sung Wei, teasingly, reminded her that he had given her mouth-to-mouth resuscitation after she fell into the water. He asked mischievously, "Does that count as our first kiss?" Gu Deok, flustered, insisted it was a life-saving measure, not a kiss. She turned her back to him, pretending to sleep. Sung Wei, however, couldn't resist teasing her further, preventing her from falling asleep. Exasperated, Gu Deok pointed to the well-worn copy of his novel on the bedside table. "If you can't sleep," she suggested, "read your book." Sung Wei, noticing the book's worn condition, a testament to countless readings, felt a pang of sadness. He realized that during their years apart, Gu Deok had found solace in his words. Later that night, Sung Wei heard Gu Deok crying in her sleep. He woke her gently, asking about her dream. Gu Deok confessed she had dreamt of her father and Lady Su Hee. The past, like a recurring nightmare, haunted her, robbing her of sleep. Sung Wei, realizing the depth of her emotional scars, sought to comfort her. Transforming back into the storyteller, he recounted their first meeting, and how he had fallen in love with her at first sight. Soothed by his voice, Gu Deok drifted off to sleep. Sung Wei watched over her, his gaze filled with tenderness. Meanwhile, Lady Su Hee, the woman Gu Deok had once served, was to be given to the royal emissary as a concubine. Bitter and resentful, she lashed out at her father for selling her to advance his career. Her father, unrepentant, felt entitled to benefit from his daughter's sacrifice, so he blamed Gu Deok for her misfortune, vowing to inflict unimaginable torment upon her if she ever found her. Soon after, So Hee arrived at the emissary's residence. Unable to resist her fate, she accepted the grim reality of her father's ambition. Knowing the emissary desired prime land in Hanyang, she offered a deal. She didn't want gifts or favors. She wanted the emissary's power to help her find someone. She presented him with Gu Deok's portrait. Meanwhile, Sung Wei, wanting to support Gu Deok and alleviate her burdens, decided to take the state exam. Aiming for a government position in the Cheongsu district, he threw himself into his studies, even seeking Gu Deok's help. She created a rigorous study schedule, allowing no room for distractions. Sung Wei dedicated himself to his studies, often confining himself to his room for days. Du Jium approached Sung Wei, his expression troubled. Sung Wei invited him for drinks, offering a listening ear. Du Jium confided his anxieties about his relationship with Mai Ryong. Despite accepting her, an awkwardness lingered between them. He felt she stayed only for the child, and she likely felt he tolerated her solely for the same reason. Sung Wei, drawing from his own experiences, encouraged Du Jium to pursue his feelings bravely, not to fear rejection. Seeing Gu Deok shouldering so much responsibility, Sung Wei wanted to share her burdens. His decision to take the state exam at his age wasn't without its anxieties. He worried about what he would do if Gu Deok rejected him, but his love for her emboldened him, giving him the courage to try. Watching Du Jium struggle with his feelings for Mi Rong, Sung Wei advised him to be honest and confess his love, assuring her that he would always be there for her. Later that afternoon, Gu Deok, returning from work, saw slave hunters armed with swords and knives roaming the streets. Fearing they were Lady Su Hee's men, sent to capture her, she rushed home to warn Sung Wei, but he was nowhere to be found. Mai Ryong explained that the two brothers had gone out drinking and would return soon. Gu Deok, picking up the baby clothes Mi Ryong had sewn, admired her handiwork. Mai Ryong encouraged Gu Deok to have children of her own. Describing the sense of peace and fulfillment that pregnancy brought, she confessed that finding true love was the greatest happiness. Gu Deok agreed, yet she also feared that happiness, unsure if she deserved it. As night fell, with the brothers still not home, Gu Deok grew increasingly worried, sending out search parties. They eventually returned, with Du Jium and Sung Wei. Du Jium excused himself to speak with Mai Ryong. Gu Deok pulled Sung Wei aside. Despite her worry for his safety, her words were sharp, laced with anxiety. She confessed that his presence filled her with fear, every moment a reminder of his precarious position, of the potential for discovery. She felt more at ease when he wasn't around. Sung Wee, deeply hurt by her words, walked away in silence. Gu Deok, instantly regretting her outburst, rushed after him, forgetting even to put on her shoes. She found Sung Wei speaking with the slave hunters. Fearing for his safety, she picked up a rock, ran towards him, and placed herself between him and the men, ordering them to stay back. Sung Wei gently pulled her aside, explaining that he had hired the men to search for her father. Gu Deok, overwhelmed with relief, collapsed into his arms, confessing her fear that he would leave her. Sung Wei reassured her, promising he would never abandon her, no matter how harsh her words were. Gu Deok, her voice trembling, explained her fear of happiness, of love. She had never experienced either, and the recent weeks of contentment felt like a fragile dream. She feared it would shatter, leaving her with nothing. "I have nowhere else to go," she whispered. "Please don't leave me." Finally allowing herself to be vulnerable, she admitted she couldn't bear to lose him. They embraced, casting aside their fears, and resolving to truly become husband and wife. Sung Wei carried Gu Deok home on his back, believing everyone to be asleep. However, another conflict awaited them. Du Jiam and Mai Rong were arguing. He repeatedly questioned the sincerity of her feelings for him. Mi Ryong confessed that while her initial intentions had been deceptive, her actions in saving him from the cart had been genuine, as was the happiness she felt being married to him. She was hurt that he still doubted her, adding with a hint of self-deprecating humor that if she weren't pregnant, he probably wouldn't even allow her to stay. Just as Du Jiam was about to explain himself, Mi Ryong felt a strange sensation and looked down to see blood staining her skirt. She cried out in alarm, calling for Gu Deok. Gu Deok rushed to her side, helping her lie down and quickly summoning a physician. After examining Mai Ryong, the physician announced that she was not pregnant. The bleeding was due to an irregular menstrual cycle. Mai Ryong was in disbelief. She had experienced nausea and morning sickness, the telltale signs of pregnancy. The physician patiently explained that her intense desire for a child had likely manifested as a phantom pregnancy. Gu Deok and Sung Wei both reassured Du Jiam that Mai Ryong's love for him was genuine. They urged him to trust and care for her. Feeling remorseful, Du Jiam returned to Mai Ryong's side, tending to her needs. He discovered her journal, filled with entries addressed to their unborn child, every word expressing her love and anticipation. Witnessing her grief, Du Jiam was heartbroken, staying by her side throughout the night. When he awoke, Mi Ryong was gone, leaving only a letter. He rushed to her adoptive father's house, searching for her, only to learn she had returned to the brothel. Before being taken in by her adoptive family, Mai Ryong had worked there, performing menial tasks. Now, needing to support herself, she had nowhere else to turn. Tragically, soon after returning, she was mistaken for a courtesan and harassed by a customer. Du Jiam arrived just in time, rescuing her and firmly declaring himself her husband. Finding a quiet place, he finally confessed his love for her, admitting that regardless of her initial intentions, his feelings were genuine. They embraced, tears streaming down their faces, and returned home hand in hand. Soon after, Du Jiam received his official appointment. He was to be transferred to a different district. The night before his departure, he expressed his gratitude to Gu Deok for raising him. He had hoped to serve closer to home, but fate had other plans. Gu Deok tearfully bid him farewell. Mai Ryong, rolling up her sleeve, revealed the bracelet Gu Deok had given her. It was the first gift she had ever received that carried such warmth and kindness. She vowed to cherish it always. Before leaving, Du Jiam entrusted Gu Deok's care to Sung Wei, and they departed, their family waving goodbye. The next day, Gu Deok learned that the magistrate's wife was encouraging people to invest in a rare ginseng cultivation project. Unfamiliar with this particular ginseng, Gu Deok considered investigating. However, with Sung Wei's upcoming exam, she decided to prioritize his studies, dismissing the matter as unimportant. She had no idea that this seemingly insignificant detail would soon lead to devastating consequences. The new magistrate had arrived in Zhongxian. Gu Deok was unaware that this new magistrate was none other than Lady Su He's father, the man whose household she had once served. Shortly after assuming his post, the magistrate presented a lucrative business opportunity to the district governor. He had a friend, Hyung Soon, who was selling seeds of a rare and valuable ginseng variety. After some persuasion, Hyung Soon agreed to exclusively offer the seeds to the Zhongxian district, hoping the governor would encourage all the villagers to purchase them and cultivate the ginseng. The governor returned home, discussing the proposition with his wife. She readily agreed, as their finances were strained after hiring a tutor for their struggling son. She saw the ginseng venture as a quick way to make money. The governor, however, felt uneasy about the magistrate's offer, sensing something amiss, and cautioned his wife against acting impulsively. Meanwhile, Gu Diok dedicated herself to helping Seung Wei prepare for the state exam. With her by his side, Seung Wei found himself easily distracted, playfully teasing her, pinching her cheeks, and enjoying her flustered reactions. Maxim brought them snacks, encouraging them to study diligently. Seung Wei, ever playful, opened his mouth expectantly, waiting for Gu Diok to feed him. After taking a bite, he reciprocated, feeding her in return. A drop of sauce landed on her lip, and he instinctively reached out to wipe it away. Then, without thinking, brought his finger to his lips, savoring the taste. Mid-gesture, he realized what he had done. Looking up at Gu Diok, she blushed, a charged silence filling the air. Drawn to each other, they leaned in, their lips almost touching. At the last moment, Seung Wei pulled back, reminding her of the importance of his studies. The entire village was anticipating his success. He couldn't afford to be distracted. He excused himself, saying they should sleep separately until after the exam. Gu Diok, her mind racing from the almost kiss, the warmth of his touch lingering on her skin, found herself unable to sleep. She wandered to Seung Wei's room, finding him engrossed in his books. Not wanting to disturb him, she returned to her room, restlessness keeping her awake. On the day of the exam, Gu Diok and her family went to support Seung Wei. He entered the examination hall with confidence. The governor's wife, spotting her son's name on the list of successful candidates, rejoiced, bragging to Seung Wei and Gu Diok, who couldn't find their names. Seung Wei apologized for disappointing them. Later, the chief examiner emerged, announcing the top scholar of the national exam, Yoon Jum. The new magistrate's wife was speechless. Gu Diok and the others surrounded Seung Wei, laughing and congratulating him on achieving the highest score. A celebratory feast was held in Seung Wei's honor. He asked Gu Diok to grant him a wish. She asked, "What is your wish?" A playful smile on her face. "Our first night together? Is that what you think I would wish for?" He teased. "Our wedding night." After the feast, Gu Diok presented Maxim with a new set of clothes and offered to arrange a wedding ceremony for her and her beloved. They exchanged vows in a simple but heartfelt ceremony, witnessed by Gu Diok and Seung Wei. Though modest, it was a great honor for the couple. Later, as they strolled outside, Gu Diok, assuming Seung Wei's wish had been about consummating their marriage, was surprised to learn that he had instead wished for Maxim's happiness. "I know how much you care for those around you," he explained, "so I wanted to grant you your wish, to see them happy." Gu Diok asked, "But what about your wish?" "My wish," Seung Wei whispered, leaning closer, "was to spend my wedding night with you." Overcome with emotion, Gu Diok kissed him. Seung Wei, responding to her unspoken invitation, deepened the kiss, both lost in the moment. The next day, a villager sought Gu Diok's help. He had mortgaged his land to buy ginseng seeds from Hyung-soon. The promised delivery date had passed 3 days ago, and Hyung-soon was nowhere to be found. The villager feared he had been scammed. Gu Diok was alarmed. This wasn't the first complaint she had received about Hyung-soon. Something was amiss. Following his success in the exam, Seung Wei was appointed as a special investigator, working alongside the district governor. As they were discussing the case, a group of angry villagers stormed into the governor's office, demanding answers. Chaos had erupted in Zhongxian. Following the governor's wife's advice, many villagers had sold their possessions to invest in the ginseng seeds, only to discover that Hyung-soon was a con artist. Simultaneously, a crowd gathered outside the governor's residence, demanding justice. The governor's wife, panicked, claimed she was merely following the magistrate's instructions and had no involvement in the scheme. Gu Diok immediately recognized the magistrate's hand in this. She knew that after she had rejected his advances years ago, he had targeted the governor's wife, exploiting her greed. Furious, the governor and Seung Wei went to confront the magistrate. Upon seeing the magistrate's face, Seung Wei froze, recognizing him. He sent his servant racing back home, urging Gu Diok to hide. He attempted to leave before the magistrate recognized him, but the magistrate stopped him, remarking that he looked familiar. Seung Wei, maintaining his composure, introduced himself as Yoon Jium, the special investigator. The governor, breaking free from Seung Wei's grasp, lunged at the magistrate. Just then, Gu Diok entered, her servant having arrived too late to warn her of the danger. The sight of the magistrate triggered a flood of traumatic memories. Paralyzed with fear, she stood frozen. Seung Wei, seeing her distress, urged her to leave. She turned and fled, her legs shaking. Outside, weak and disoriented, she nearly collapsed. Just as she thought she had escaped, Lady Su-hee appeared. Gu Diok quickly bowed her head, hoping to go unnoticed. As So-hee passed, she straightened up and began to walk away. But So-hee recognized her. She said, "It's so good to see you, Gu-deok," a chilling smile spreading across her face. Miss So-hee accused the woman in front of her of being her slave, Gu-deok. Gu-deok pretended to stay calm and lied, saying she was Tae-young, a lawyer from Chungcheong County, and also a noblewoman. She said if So-hee kept falsely accusing her, she could totally sue So-hee for disrespecting a noble. So-hee asked the servant next to her if this person was Gu-deok. Without hesitating, the servant said this person wasn't Gu-deok. Seeing her lie so blatantly, So-hee got mad and wanted to hit the servant. Gu-deok spoke up, warning that in Chungcheong County, mistreating household slaves was forbidden. To throw them off track, she pretended to mistake So-hee for the magistrate's wife, reminding her to remember her high status and not do things that weren't fitting for someone of her position. So-hee corrected her, saying the magistrate was her father and the royal inspector was her husband. Gu-deok was shocked, not realizing that the person So-hee was relying on was the same royal inspector who was involved in the illegal gold mining case 7 years ago. At the same time, the chief found out from the magistrate that he was the royal inspector's father-in-law. Hearing that name, the chief quickly pulled Sung-wei away from the government office. Gu-deok and Sung-wei returned home, both knowing the current situation was very dangerous. The servant quickly packed things up, urging them both to leave right away. Gu-deok pulled out a bundle she'd prepared beforehand, telling Sung-wei to go with the servant. Ever since Sung-wei came to Chungcheong County, she'd worried this day might come, so she'd been prepared. Sung-wei flatly refused to leave. He took the civil service exam and became a special inspector, precisely to be near Gu-deok. Seeing this, the servant had no choice but to stay and live or die with them. At that moment, danger was closing in, so he angrily demanded her father order Gu-deok's arrest. She insisted that if they just tortured her, Gu-deok would definitely confess. But the magistrate said he couldn't just interrogate a noblewoman without evidence and scolded So-hee, telling her to go home to the royal inspector's place. The Grand Madam, that is, the former chief's wife, and the current chief's wife, both found out that the person behind the magistrate was the royal inspector who bankrupted them in the gold mining case 7 years ago. They suspected the royal inspector bought the magistrate's position for him. The magistrate was colluding with the swindler Hyo-soo to cheat the common people. But right now, there was no evidence proving the magistrate and Hyo-soo were on the same side. Now, they could only put their hope in Gu-deok, believing she could help the people get justice. Gu-deok tossed and turned, unable to sleep. It had come to this. She had to go see someone. Together with Sung-wei, she went to find Mr. and Mrs. Gu-buk, the servants who worked for So-hee, and admitted that she was the slave Gu-deok. Seeing that she was safe and sound, they were so happy they cried. Gu-deok saw that Mr. Gu-buk couldn't speak, and Mrs. Gu-buk's leg was crippled, and asked why. Seeing them hesitate, she immediately understood. It was because they helped her escape that So-hee had beaten them. Gu-deok hugged Mrs. Gu-buk, sobbing and blaming herself for getting them involved. The Grand Madam brought the chief's wife to Gu-deok for help. The chief's wife regretted doing so many things wrong to Gu-deok, hoping Gu-deok would be generous and help her catch Hyo-soo and return the people's hard-earned money. Gu-deok told her to tell her the details of what happened back then. The chief's wife remembered that the magistrate had introduced Hyo-soo to her. Hyo-soo said the 10,000-year ginseng could resist pests and drought, and furthermore, its growth period was only 3 months, a precious treasure that could make them rich. That's why she was fooled. Sung-wei and the chief went to see the magistrate again. Afterwards, Sung-wei reported the information he'd gathered to Gu-deok. Turns out the magistrate was just pretending to look for Hyo-soo, seemingly wanting to stall until everyone gave up. Gu-deok had found out that Hyo-soo was a famous doctor in Handang, and all the pharmacies in Chungcheong County knew his name. So she told Sung-wei to go find Hyo-soo himself. At the same time, she decided to go see the loan shark, because after the incident, they were demanding people pay back their loans immediately. So she wanted to ask for more time for them. Before she could act, strange rumors suddenly started spreading among the people. Turns out, So-hee wanted to force Gu-deok to admit her identity. So she was spreading rumors everywhere that Gu-deok was a slave. The Grand Madam came to Gu-deok, saying So-hee had come to her, demanding she investigate Gu-deok. The Grand Madam told So-hee straight up that her slave had run away 10 years ago, and Gu-deok had been in Chungcheong County for 10 years already. Gu-deok was not only the daughter-in-law of the former magistrate, but had also helped her brother-in-law become the top scholar in the imperial exam. In Chungcheong County, the most respected person wasn't So-hee, but Gu Diok. The Grand Madam had successfully chased Su He away, but she hoped Gu Diok could tell her the truth. Gu Diok admitted she was the slave Su He was looking for. Years ago, the whole Ok family was killed by robbers at the inn, and she was the only survivor. When she woke up, she found herself in Chungcheong County. Her grandmother knew the truth but still accepted her as Taeyang. Years ago, So He and her father had buried her sick mother alive. Now, they were threatening Chungcheong County, the place she considered her second home. She couldn't run away. Moreover, she was living under the identity of Miss Taeyang, so she had to fulfill Taeyang's dream of becoming a lawyer and helping the people. The Grand Madam felt sorry for Gu Diok's fate and admired her spirit even more, and finished her cup of tea, saying she'd forgotten everything she'd heard. To get So He, who was always lurking around, out of Chungcheong County, Sung Wee came up with a good idea. He had the servant dress up as a bounty hunter and told them to falsely relay an order from the royal inspector, lying that they'd found Gu Diok's whereabouts in Handang, and telling So He to hurry home. So he believed it, and the next day, she left Chungcheong County. Mrs. Mo, keeping her promise to Gu Diok, secretly gave Mrs. Gu Buk a package. Inside was some money, hoping it could help make life a little easier for her and her husband. On the other side, her brother-in-law had reported the scam affecting the people of Chungcheong County to His Majesty. His Majesty sent a royal inspector to Chungcheong County to handle the matter. This person was the son of the Grand Madam, that is, the former chief's wife, named Diok Hun. Diok Hun grew up in Chungcheong County, so this was like a triumphant return home. He wanted his father, the former chief, to come back with him, but the former chief still felt guilty about the incident 7 years ago that killed Du Guang's father, the former magistrate, and felt he couldn't face Gu Diok and the others. Moreover, he was showing symptoms similar to many others, with sores all over his body, suspecting he had a strange disease. At this time, the royal inspector ordered his subordinates to collect the best medicinal herbs, spreading rumors about the strange disease. Once they implemented a quarantine, the price of herbs would skyrocket, and they could take the opportunity to make a profit. As soon as the royal inspector finished speaking, So he rushed home, asking the royal inspector where Gu Diok was. The royal inspector, annoyed by her noise, grabbed her neck, threatening to kill her if she didn't listen. So he immediately quieted down. Not long after, Diok Hun arrived in Chungcheong County to take office. He told Gu Diok that with the support of the left minister, the royal inspector was leading corrupt officials in embezzling and exploiting the people, and was the left minister's piggy bank. To break the left minister's plan to control the country, they had to cut off the royal inspector's funding. Currently, they needed to investigate fraud cases everywhere connected to the royal inspector. To find the mastermind, they had to find Heyosu. Sung Wai found out that Heyosu had been kicked out of his house in Handang by his family because of gambling. He discussed it with the chief, deciding to open a fake gambling den to lure Heyosu and catch him. The fake gambling den quickly put up flyers and started operating. Sung Wei and the others indeed caught Heyosu coming to gamble, but Heyosu knew absolutely nothing about selling 10,000-year ginseng seeds. The chief's wife, who had met Heyosu, confirmed that this person was definitely not Heyosu. According to the chief's wife's description, Heyosu had high cheekbones and a big mole on his face. Definitely not this person. Gu Diok asked the Heyosu in front of her if he knew the magistrate. Heyosu said this was his first time here, and he had never met the magistrate. Sung Wei realized someone must have been impersonating Heyosu to commit fraud. Just when everyone was frustrated about their wild goose chase, the royal inspector suddenly appeared, saying he wanted to meet Diok Hun, the royal inspector sent by the court, and also pretended to care about the former chief's condition. The royal inspector then looked at Gu Diok. Turns out he had learned from Su He that the slave Su He was looking for was actually the lawyer Gu Diok of Chungcheong County. 7 years ago, Gu Diok had ruined his gold mining plan, and he had hated Gu Diok ever since. The royal inspector and the magistrate wanted to probe Gu Diok's identity, intentionally summoning several people. They lied that they wanted to help solve Chungcheong County's difficulties. After getting the conversation going, he questioned Gu Diok. Why did she lie to Su He that she had found the slave she was looking for, then trick her into leaving Chungcheong County? Sung Wei was about to answer when the Grand Madam suddenly spoke up. She said she was the one who tricked Su He into leaving. Chungcheong County was going through a tough time right now, and So He was running around spreading crazy rumors. This wasn't helping the people unite to overcome their difficulties. So, she had to resort to this last resort. The magistrate was meeting Gu Diok for the first time. Originally, the royal inspector told him to identify whether this person was the slave Gu Diok or not. But the magistrate was surprised by Gu Diok's calm and composed demeanor. He wasn't sure if the woman in front of him had ever been a lowly slave. In addition, the Grand Madam had taken the initiative to admit she was the one who tricked Su He. Therefore, neither of them could find any flaws, and they had to leave dejectedly. Gu Diok took the chief and his wife and the Grand Madam to the backyard to see the aloe. Not long before that, Hyo Su came to Gu Diok's house asking for food. Mrs. Mo gave him regular rice. Seeing aloe in the rice, he exclaimed in surprise that it was too luxurious, because aloe could not only be used as medicine, but also to beautify the skin, and was a precious medicinal herb. In Handang, the selling price was very high. Gu Diok and Sung We heard this news. They asked Hyo Su repeatedly to confirm whether their aloe could sell for a good price. Hyo Su said that the aloe they were growing was top-notch quality. Maybe it was because the soil here was suitable for aloe to grow. Gu Diok was overjoyed. If the aloe was valuable, it could solve the people's difficulties. Thinking of this, Gu Diok divided the mature plants and seedlings among everyone. She worked together with the villagers to plant them. The chief's wife was deeply moved. She took Gu Diok's hand, thanking her for her wisdom and altruism. Sung Wei and the chief quickly found suitable wasteland to plant the aloe. Sung Wei told the chief to definitely follow the rules and provide land reclamation permits. After everything was arranged, the chief and the others led everyone to plant aloe. An old woman also joined the planting team. She told her son and the chief that this land belonged to her. The chief just thought the old woman was confused due to old age. He said that this land belonged to all of Chungcheong County. After harvesting the aloe, Gu Diok and Sung Wei went to Handang to sell it. Gu Diok took Sung Wei to her mother's grave to pay respects. She originally thought she would never return in this lifetime. Unexpectedly, fate brought her back to her homeland once again. She introduced Sung Wei to her mother as her husband. Sung Wei swore to his mother-in-law, whom he had never met, that he would definitely take good care of Gu Diok. On the way back, Gu Diok detoured past Sung Wei's house. The two were shocked to find white lanterns hanging in front of Sung Wei's house. It turned out that Sung Wei's father had passed away, and the family was holding a funeral. Sung Wei had faked his death, so he couldn't openly give his father his final send-off. Gu Diok felt guilty, and especially set up a memorial tablet for Sung Wei's father, so Sung Wei could worship him alone. Sung Wei couldn't control his emotions, and burst into tears. He never expected that their meeting a few years ago would be the last. He regretted not being able to repay his father's kindness. After calming down, the two went to find medicinal herb merchants to negotiate the price of the aloe. The medicinal herb merchant acknowledged the quality of their aloe. He offered 10 taels per pound. The two men brought the good news back to Chungcheong County. 10 taels per pound, and they estimated they could harvest 2,000 pounds next year. They signed a contract with the medicinal herb merchant. They received 6,000 taels in advance as a deposit. They would receive the remaining money after the harvest was completed next year. Sung Wei and the magistrate divided the deposit money among the people, so that everyone could pay off some of their debts in advance. Once the remaining money was paid next year, they would definitely be able to make up for the damage caused by the fraud. The people who received the money were extremely grateful. They raised their arms and shouted, "Long live Sung Wei!" Sung Wei looked at Gu Diok with embarrassment. Gu Diok was smiling back at him. That evening, Gu Diok and Sung Wei drank alcohol to relieve their sorrows. Sung Wei exclaimed. He once felt regret because he couldn't use his acting skills to bring joy to people. But today, in his identity as Du Guang, he also made everyone smile. This was a kind of accomplishment he had never experienced before. Gu Diok was very happy. She recognized Sung Wei as a soulmate who shared her goals. That night, she took the initiative and suggested that the two of them sleep in the same room. Sung Wei immediately pulled her into his arms. The two of them caressed and embraced each other. Finally, they welcomed their belated wedding night. However, the next morning, bright and early, the old woman's son came running, breathless, to report. The land where they were growing the aloe seemed to belong to someone else. Gu Diok and Sung Wei, upon hearing this, immediately went to see the magistrate. The magistrate produced a land reclamation permit issued 2 years ago, declaring that the land belonged to a henchman of the Grand Supervisor. Gu Diok doubted the authenticity of the document. Someone who had nothing to do with Chungcheong County. How could they have obtained a land reclamation permit for this wasteland? The magistrate loudly said that everything had to be based on the documents. Because the land had already been reclaimed and cultivated, they could continue to work on it. But the landowner also had to share in the profits. The landowner would get 8 parts, and the people would get 2. The two returned to discuss this with the magistrate. The magistrate was extremely distressed. Only now did he understand When they went to get the land reclamation permit, the magistrate always used the excuse of being busy with official duties to delay it, so that they would cultivate first. He would complete the land reclamation permit later when he had time. Now thinking about it, it was a trap he had set. Gu Diok suspected the magistrate of forging the documents. The old woman had said that the land belonged to her. Gu Diok had already sent someone home to find the old woman's land deed. The magistrate didn't have much hope in this. The old woman was senile, and what she said wasn't trustworthy. Just then, the servant came to report. The old woman had found the land deed, and had rushed to the government office with her son. Gu Diok and the others were overjoyed, and rushed over as well. But when they arrived, they saw the magistrate beating the old woman's son, falsely accusing him of forging the land deed, and then tearing up the land deed. Sung Wei rushed forward to stop the cruel magistrate, and wanted to fight back. Gu Diok strongly restrained him, telling him to hold back. Now was not the time to start a conflict. Gu Diok returned and pieced the old woman's land deed back together. At the same time, she researched legal documents, deciding to file a complaint with the surveillance commissioner. Very soon after that, the lawsuit regarding the ownership of the wasteland was brought to trial. The Grand Supervisor's henchmen brought 5 or 6 lawyers to oppose Gu Diok. Gu Diok presented the pieced-together land deed, explaining that this was a land division deed from 48 years ago. It was the old woman's dowry. The opposing lawyers accused. This land deed lacked witnesses to testify, and there were no records to be found. It was very likely a forgery. At the same time, they presented a certificate from a doctor, proving that the old woman suffered from senility. What she said was basically not credible. Gu Diok didn't panic at all, and presented her evidence. This was a judgment document, confirming that the old woman had won ownership of this land in a lawsuit with her sisters. The time was much earlier than the Grand Supervisor's henchman's land deed, as well as the land reclamation permit. The opposing lawyers suspected a judgment document couldn't easily be obtained by a lawyer. Gu Diok explained. This document was copied by her late father-in-law. During the time her father-in-law was the magistrate, he worried that the judgment document could be destroyed by fire or damaged. So, during his time in office, he often took the time to copy old judgments. As soon as these words were spoken, the opposing lawyers knew that they had no way out, and withdrew the lawsuit on the spot. The surveillance commissioner immediately announced that the land belonged to the old woman. Hearing the verdict, Gu Diok sighed in relief. The people were even more overjoyed. After this matter was resolved, Sung Wei suddenly stood up to accuse the magistrate. The magistrate didn't care about the people's difficulties. He was only interested in exploiting the people's wealth. He had obtained a sample of the magistrate's handwriting from the government office. The handwriting on the land permit and the Grand Supervisor's henchman's land deed were exactly the same. This proved that the documents and land deed were all forged by the magistrate. The officials in the government office were all willing to testify to this. The magistrate yelled that Sung Wei was slandering him. Sung Wei continued to accuse. As a magistrate, not only did he not love the people, but yesterday, he even beat the old woman's son into a cripple in front of her. According to the law, he proposed to remove the magistrate from his position and punish him with 100 lashes. The people unanimously echoed Sung Wei, demanding that the surveillance commissioner handle the magistrate according to the law. The surveillance commissioner complied with the people's wishes, ordering the arrest of the magistrate to be executed immediately. Gu Diok looked at Sung Wei with gratitude. She didn't know that Sung Wei had prepared in advance to counterattack the magistrate, thanking him for helping the people and avenging her as well. Sung Wei gently held his lover's hand. He once said that he would help Gu Diok get revenge. Now he had finally done it. The magistrate was dragged away for execution, begging Gu Diok to spare him. Unexpectedly, Gu Diok revealed a familiar look in her eyes. That look was exactly like the resolute expression she had when she assassinated him years ago. Not long after, the good news that the magistrate had been flogged to death arrived. Mr. and Mrs. Gu Buk had tears in their eyes, thanking Gu Diok for eliminating the magistrate who didn't treat people as human beings, saving them from the frying pan. After avenging her great enemy, Gu Diok happily discovered that she was pregnant. Sung Wei was about to become a father, and his face was full of joy. He planned to take Gu Diok to the beach to relax. He went shopping for things for the trip, but on the way back, he saw a group of soldiers running towards his house. Gu Diok felt uneasy when she heard the soldiers shouting, instructing the servant to find Sung Wei. They had to give Sung Wei a signal by holding up one finger. Before she could finish speaking, the soldiers, carrying a portrait, arrested Gu Diok. Sung Wei was extremely distressed and wanted to rush in, but the servant held him back. Gu Diok had said before, if they saw the signal of one finger being held up, They had to leave without looking back. Only then could everyone survive. Gu Diok was arrested. The servant dragged Sung Wei and ran for their lives. The two ran to a field, stopping to catch their breath. Sung Wei ordered the servant to run away on their own. He followed out to ensure the safety of the servant, who was always by his side. And he had to go back to save Gu Diok. The servant reminded him that his identity had been exposed. Before, he faked his death and fled to Dashing to become a storyteller, which was equivalent to defying an imperial order, and now returning would only lead to death. But Sung Wei resolutely refused to abandon Gu Diok. Seeing the soldiers approaching, in order to buy time for the servant, Sung Wei took the initiative to surrender but was shot in the hand by the soldiers. The servant, worried, turned back to check, resulting in both of them being arrested. Sung Wei and Gu Diok were interrogated separately. Gu Diok remembered what she was told, insisting that she was Taeyong and not Gu Diok. In order to save Gu Diok and the servant, Sung Wei took all the blame, admitting that he was Sung Wei, who impersonated Du Guang and lived with Taeyong. 7 years ago, he fell in love with Taeyong at first sight. Because he looked like Du Guang, he deceived her. Her brother-in-law was desperate to save his brother and sister-in-law. Mai Ryong told him to tell the truth. Her brother-in-law confessed that the person they brought back was Sung Wei. Sung Wei loved his sister-in-law, and, hearing that she was in trouble, came to Chungcheong County with her. He knew Sung Wei's identity, but didn't know his sister-in-law's background. Worrying that he wouldn't be able to save her, Mai Ryong comforted her brother-in-law, saying that they could only proceed one step at a time. Sung Wei and Gu Diok met when they were taken back to their prison cells. After the interrogation, he told her that he was no longer her husband, but Seung Wei. Gu Diok looked at their engagement token, filled with self-reproach, feeling that she had implicated Sung Wei. So he heard the news that Sung Wei had confessed and Gu Diok might be released. She questioned the Grand Supervisor why he didn't present evidence to arrest Gu Diok, but instead used the two of them. She exposed the fact that the Grand Supervisor had used Gu Diok and Sung Wei to cause trouble in the Forbidden Guard's office, and was promoted, but was still not satisfied, proving that he had even bigger ambitions. The Grand Supervisor grabbed her chin, warning her that if she continued to speak carelessly, he wouldn't let her off. So he was angry and decided to arrest Gu Diok herself. In the Forbidden Guard's office, after hearing Sung Wei's testimony, they planned to release Gu Diok, but because of new evidence, the situation changed again. The supervising official ordered Gu Diok and Sung Wei to be summoned. Sung Wei and the servant both thought that they would receive their final sentence, and Gu Diok would be released. Unexpectedly, the supervising official asked if the two had met in Incheon last May. Gu Diok explained that someone had hired her to defend Sung Wei, who was wrongly imprisoned for stealing a work. The supervising official pressed her, asking who had hired her. At that time, Sung Wei was being held in prison. Who had informed her? If she said that the servant came to find her, it would mean that she and Sung Wei knew each other before, and her status as a slave would also be exposed. Gu Diok didn't know how to answer, and the supervising official ordered Sung Wei and the servant to be tortured. Gu Diok asked the supervising official why he was doing this. The supervising official replied that last May, Gu Diok met Sung Wei and the servant in Incheon, and conspired to kill Du Guang, the husband who had abandoned his family. After saying that, he ordered the execution to begin. Sung Wei and the servant immediately bled profusely and screamed miserably. The supervising official ordered them to stop and continued. Sung Wei's servant hired Gu Diok to defend him and brought Gu Diok to Incheon. There was a witness who testified that during the time Sung Wei impersonated Du Guang, the servant lived with Sung Wei in Chungcheong County. From this, it can be inferred that Gu Diok clearly knew that Sung Wei was not her husband Du Guang. Hearing this, Gu Diok denied this unfounded accusation. The supervising official invited the witness to come forward. All three were surprised to find that it was the student who stole Sung Wei's book, causing Sung Wei to go to jail. The student testified that the three had known each other before, and before coming to Incheon, they had a close relationship. In Sung Wei's novel, there was a story about him and Gu Diok. In Incheon, Sung Wei and Gu Diok stayed in the same room, committing adultery. Gu Diok retorted that the student was exposed for stealing the book, and therefore harbored resentment, and falsely accused them. The supervising official ignored her accusations, and continued to torture Sung Wei and the servant. The servant fainted from the pain. Gu Diok begged the supervising official to believe her. She absolutely did not kill Du Guang. The supervising official scolded Gu Diok for deceiving him, ordered her to be tied up, and tortured. Her brother-in-law knelt down and took all the responsibility, saying that he did everything and wanted to be punished. Gu Diok didn't want to implicate her brother-in-law and lied that because she couldn't endure the widowed life. She asked Sung Wei to pretend to be Du Guang, but she never killed Du Guang. The supervising official no longer believed Gu Diok and ordered the torture to continue. Sung Wei heard Gu Diok's miserable screams. His heart was breaking. Just as her brother-in-law was about to tell the truth and take all the responsibility on himself, he shouted that he killed Du Guang himself. He lied that he hated Du Guang for abandoning his wife for 7 years. When he met Du Guang in Daxing, he advised Du Guang to return to Gu Diok, but was rejected. Because of his dissatisfaction, he killed Du Guang. It was all his doing alone. He had deceived everyone, begging the supervising official to release Gu Diok and the servant. Because Sung Wei had confessed, the supervising official ordered Gu Diok to be released. He turned back to ask Gu Diok one more time, was she really Miss Tae-young, or the slave Gu Diok? Gu Diok was silent for a few seconds. Just as she was about to answer, the supervising official ordered someone to be brought in. Gu Diok turned her head to see who was coming, and tears fell down her face. It was her father. The moment she saw her father, her psychological defenses completely collapsed, and she recognized her father on the spot. Gu Diok's identity was therefore exposed. Afterward, Sung Wei and the servant were thrown back into prison. The servant was seriously injured and didn't survive, dying in prison. Sung Wei hugged the servant's body, in extreme pain, blaming himself for causing his death. The next day, the Forbidden Guard's office announced the sentences for Sung Wei and Gu Diok. Sung Wei was sentenced to death for killing Du Guang, impersonating an identity, and defying an imperial order by faking his death. The slave Gu Diok was guilty of harming her master and running away, as well as impersonating Tae-young of the nobility. She should have been executed. However, considering that she had worked in the External Affairs Department and helped many people, she was spared the death penalty and returned to her master, So-hee. The trial ended, and Gu Diok was splashed with filth, waking her up. So-hee cruelly said that she would make her life worse than death. The child in her belly would also be her slave. Mrs. Gu Buk visited Gu Diok, informing her that her father was currently safe. Initially, her father lived in a remote temple. After being arrested and brought back, he was locked in a different room to prevent the servants from discovering him. Mrs. Gu Buk also revealed that this was the Grand Supervisor's secret warehouse. He used the herbs stored here to make medicine for sale. Gu Diok guessed that the large-scale purchase of aloe might be related to this, so he took the liberty of bringing Gu Diok's father to the Forbidden Guard's office, and was punished by the Grand Supervisor. The Grand Madam, that is, the former wife of the chief, requested to meet Gu Diok. Otherwise, she would reveal that So-hee, as a concubine, had attended the meeting of noble ladies. She was rejected and bullied by the Grand Supervisor. If that happened, So-hee would lose all face. In order to save face, So-hee had no choice but to agree. The Grand Madam gave Gu Diok Sung Wei's letter, telling her to be strong, because before being isolated, the former chief had said a few things. During the epidemic, the Grand Supervisor intentionally revealed the identities of Gu Diok and Sung Wei, clearly wanting to distract the attention of the Forbidden Guard, just like he had deceived Gu Diok's father-in-law 7 years ago. The Grand Madam reminded Gu Diok not to be used by the Grand Supervisor, and to find a way to escape from here. After the Grand Madam left, Gu Diok read Sung Wei's letter. In the letter, Sung Wei said that he didn't regret returning to find Gu Diok. Even if he did it 10,000 times, he would still choose the same thing, because Gu Diok was the most precious gift in his life. He planned to write their story into his final work. The content was not the story of a woman grieving for her husband, but the story of a female slave, but resilient, strong, and always willing to help others. After reading the letter, Gu Diok burst into sobs. Even in the last moments of his life, Sung Wei was always encouraging her. She had to survive in this desperate situation, seeking a glimmer of hope for both of them. Gu Diok's will to survive surged. When So-hee came to cause trouble, she immediately showed her the pus on her hand, saying that she had been infected with the plague. So-hee, afraid of being infected, immediately sent her to the plague village for isolation. There, Gu Diok saw a familiar figure. That person looked very much like Du Guang's subordinate. Just as she was surprised, another familiar figure appeared. They locked eyes with each other. Those familiar eyebrows were none other than Du Guang, who had been missing for many years. She questioned Du Guang why he didn't come home, even if it was just to send a message to say he was safe. Du Guang's servant answered for him. Du Guang couldn't speak anymore. That year, after running away, they had formed a charity group, striving to create an equal world for everyone. But the charity group was destroyed by the Grand Supervisor. Du Guang went alone to assassinate the Grand Supervisor, but was seriously injured. Although he survived, he could no longer speak and suffered from heart disease. After that, Du Guang dedicated the rest of his life to caring for patients. So they came to the plague village. Gu Diok told Du Guang that in those years, she had truly resented him. Then, during the long waiting period, she also abandoned the responsibilities of a wife, choosing to be with the person she loved. Since things had come to this, she hoped that they wouldn't grieve anymore. Just as Gu Diok arrived at the plague village, her brother-in-law also came there to save her. The moment he saw Du Guang, he couldn't keep his composure anymore, rushing to hit his brother. Because of Du Guang, Sung Wei, who was innocent, was about to pay with his life. Gu Diok stopped her brother-in-law, telling him what had happened to Du Guang. The urgent matter now was not to fight, but to find out the Grand Supervisor's conspiracy. Gu Diok discovered that Hyo Su had also come here as a volunteer. Hyo Su had excellent medical skills, analyzing that this strange disease was not infectious. The patients brought here with symptoms of the strange disease all had underlying conditions. The former chief confirmed Hyo Su's words. Before contracting the strange disease, he had arthritis, and he had always taken painkillers made from kudzu root. At this time, Gu Diok suddenly noticed blisters appearing on her brother-in-law, which were symptoms of the strange disease. Hyo Su quickly asked her brother-in-law if he had any underlying conditions or injuries. Her brother-in-law said that he had sprained his wrist. The former chief suddenly spoke up, saying that her brother-in-law had taken the kudzu root that he had given him. It was a painkiller he bought at the pharmacy. He wanted to help her brother-in-law relieve the pain, but he didn't expect her brother-in-law to contract the strange disease as well. Gu Diok suspected that this disease was not contagious. Only people with underlying conditions who took kudzu root contracted the disease. More and more people were being brought to the plague village, but the amount of food and herbs distributed didn't match the number of people, proving that the mastermind was the Grand Supervisor, who created this artificial epidemic. Then, he profited through cutting back on food and herbs. Hyo Su discovered that there was poison in the kudzu root, and only snake tongue grass root could detoxify it. Unfortunately, this common herb didn't grow nearby. Gu Diok wanted to immediately set off for Handang to pick snake tongue grass root. Her brother-in-law stopped her, saying that she was pregnant, and the consequences would be dire if anything happened. Du Guang, who was standing beside them listening, took the initiative to step out. Gu Diok knew what he wanted to do, only instructing him to be sure to return safely. Du Guang held her hand, looked at everyone, and resolutely left with his servant. The Grand Supervisor learned that Gu Diok had discovered his secret of creating the epidemic to profit, so he lied that the plague was spread through the respiratory system, requesting an order to burn down the plague village. Soon after, the Grand Supervisor led his men to surround the plague village. The Forbidden Guard's office learned that the entire plague village was about to be burned down and wanted to save the patients inside, but they didn't have any evidence to expose the Grand Supervisor's conspiracy. Just as they were worried, Du Guang rushed into the Forbidden Guard's office. He clutched the lapel of his coat, struggling to speak, and after several attempts, managed to say one sentence with difficulty. "I have found snake tongue grass root, an antidote that can prove the plague was intentionally caused by the Grand Supervisor." Immediately afterward, the provincial chief led his men to the plague village to arrest the Grand Supervisor. The Grand Supervisor said that everything he did was for the left minister, who would surely save him. Provincial chief coldly exposed him. "The left minister, after learning the truth, has placed all the blame on you. You have been abandoned." The wicked Grand Supervisor refused to admit his guilt and eventually died during the execution. After the Grand Supervisor was dethroned, Su He, who had helped the Grand Supervisor cover up his crimes, was demoted to slavery, along with her unborn child, to be slaves for generations to come. The provincial chief ordered all the slaves who were caring for patients in the plague village to be returned to their former masters, and told Gu Diok that Sung Wei couldn't endure imprisonment and had died in prison. Gu Diok was heartbroken, trying to keep her spirits up, asking to make a final plea as a lawyer. She pleaded for the slaves who had contributed to caring for patients in the plague village. If it weren't for these slaves' care, the plague village wouldn't have survived to this day. She hoped the provincial chief would remove their slave status, returning their freedom to them. The provincial chief agreed to submit it to higher authorities. He asked why Gu Diok wasn't pleading for herself. Gu Diok looked at the engagement token in her hand. Losing the person she loved, it no longer mattered to her what status she lived with. At this time, the provincial chief took out an imperial edict, announcing Gu Diok to receive the decree. It turned out that the villagers of Chungcheong County, wanting to save Gu Diok, disregarding the danger, had gone together to the royal palace to petition, begging the king to spare Gudiak, considering that she had devoted herself to the people. The king was moved by the people's affection for Gudiak, and added to that, Gudiak had proactively gone to the plague village to investigate the truth of the strange disease, saving countless lives, so he granted a special pardon to Gudiak, removing her slave status. Gudiak was released. Welcoming her outside were all the villagers of Chungcheong County, and her father, who was safe. She looked towards the crowd, saddened that she would no longer see the person she missed day and night. 3 years later, the aloe business in Chungcheong County was thriving. Gudiak continued to work as a lawyer, helping those in need. Her brother-in-law and Mai Ryong had a daughter named Baek-won. Gudiak's son Man-seok lived with Gudiak's father in a seaside hut. Everyone went together to the beach. Gudiak told Man-seok to call his father out. The person who came out of the hut was Sung-wee. That year, after telling the provincial chief about the snake-tongue grass root, Du Guang used the last of his strength to go to the prison, asking to die in place of Sung-wee, hoping that Sung-wee would continue to live happily in his place. After saying these words, he closed his eyes and passed away. For the past 3 years, Sung-wee had been living with Gudiak's father and Man-seok in the hut by the sea, writing the story of Gudiak. Now that the story was over, he held Gudiak's hand, running together towards their loved ones. The movie ends here. Thank you for your attention. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to see more great movies. Goodbye and see you again.